the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 426, 3 Heroes Fighting the Lizard, Part 2. Seeing Brian unleash his sword energy once again, Alex, hidden in the shadows, knew something was amiss. As expected, Brian nearly got himself into trouble again, but fortunately, Steve's shield was strong enough. Brian was in a state of panic. He desperately wanted to do something good to prove himself, but the more he tried, the more mistakes he made. Brian simply couldn't control the sword in the stone, and it would only lead to even greater mistakes. If this happened a few more times, Brian would be ruined. Instantly, Alex began telepathically contacting Brian. "Brian, it's Alex." Brian's face tightened as he watched his own sword energy strike his own men again. He opened his mouth to explain, but words faltered, and Brian didn't know how to defend himself. Just then, Alex's voice echoed in his mind, and Brian, as if grasping a lifeline, cried out in surprise, unable to hold back his tears. The words he had been holding back seemed to have found an outlet, pouring out uncontrollably. Alex frowned and forced himself to listen for a moment, but Brian kept repeating the same thing over and over again. "I'm sorry, please believe me." After a moment's forced silence, Alex finally interrupted Brian's chatter. "Brian, if you want us to believe you, prove yourself." Brian paused, and after a moment's silence, he trembled and began to speak. "But, I'm afraid." As he spoke, he couldn't help but look up at Steve and Peter Parker, who were not far away. The two had already heard Alex's warning and hadn't bothered Brian, instead focusing on dealing with Dr. Lizard. Without this burden of Brian, the fight was much easier. Dr. Lizard was becoming increasingly miserable, his wounds mounting. It wasn't long before Dr. Lizard would surrender. "Are you afraid and won't do it?" Alex's voice reverberated in Brian's mind like thunder, its mighty voice subtly captivating. Brian's mental state was in turmoil, and Alex could only use his charm to temporarily calm him before discussing other matters. Under the influence of Alex's telepathy, Brian's mind gradually calmed down. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and replied, "No." After a brief pause, he added, "I want to prove myself, with action." As soon as he finished speaking, Brian's right hand tightened around the sword of stone, as if he were about to strike again. Alex was startled by this and quickly shouted, "Brian, stop!" Not only had Brian not yet recovered enough to control this sword of stone with ease, but Steve and Peter Parker were already aligning with each other. If Brian suddenly intervened, it would only disrupt their rhythm and backfire. Brian, still a young man, had no idea what was happening. Although he obediently withdrew his grip, his expression was one of deep frustration. He lowered his head slightly and glanced around, as if trying to find Alex. Alex rolled his eyes inwardly and immediately sent a telepathic message, asking sternly, "Brian, do you think you're ready? When you attacked just now, were you sure you wouldn't hurt Captain America and Spider-Man? Were you sure you could hit Dr. Lizard?" These 3 questions in a row completely stupefied Brian, who stood there motionless for a long moment. Alex stood at a distance, neither appearing nor sending telepathic messages, quietly observing Brian's transformation. Brian was truly transforming, Alex could sense it clearly. While Brian was ascending, Steve and the others were also facing trouble. After being kicked by Peter Parker again, Dr. Lizard didn't just get up and run. Instead, he grabbed a nearby woman and wrapped his tail around a little boy of 8 or 9. "Don't come over here, or I'll kill them." Dr. Lizard gripped the woman's neck with one forelimb, his sharp claws digging into her skin, causing drops of blood to seep out. The tail, like a python, wrapped around the little boy, leaving only his head exposed. His face was faintly purple, a sign of suffocation. Steve and Peter Parker, both kind-hearted, could not bear such a threat. They exchanged glances, obediently stopped, and stood still. "Dr. Lizard, put them down, and we'll let you go." Noticing the boy was suffocating, Steve immediately spoke up. "As long as you let them go, we won't break our promise." Peter Parker nodded in agreement. "Why should I believe you?" Dr. Lizard refused, turning and running. He turned back to Steve and the other 2, who were following closely behind, and threatened with a fierce look in his eyes, "Don't follow me." He then lifted the 2 hostages, a sinister grin on his lizard head. No, Steve didn't dare let Dr. Lizard go. Who knew he would kill the hostages? "It has to be done," Dr. Lizard snorted coldly, flicking his tail and circling the little boy in front of him. With a slight push, the boy burst into tears, his face turning a livid purple. Otherwise, he'll be. Steve and Peter Parker exchanged a bitter glance. They had no choice in this situation. If they left Dr. Lizard behind, the woman and boy would surely die. If they let him go, they might live or die. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, Steve and Peter Parker had no choice but to let Dr. Lizard go. Seeing Steve and Peter Parker lower their heads in despair, Dr. Lizard couldn't help but burst into laughter. But at that moment, Dr. Lizard's laughter abruptly stopped, and a shrill howl rang out. "Dr. Lizard, you forgot me." Amidst the screams, Brian's calm voice rang out. Though soft, it carried a powerful confidence. "This is your biggest mistake, and your last." Frustrated, Steve and Peter Parker glanced up at Dr. Lizard's screams, only to find his right claw and tail severed. The woman and the little boy lay dazed on the ground. Looking closer, Captain Britain stood not far behind him, clutching the sword in the stone. His expression was grim and murderous. He did this. Peter Parker stared in disbelief at the severed limb and tail at Dr. Lizard's feet. Looking across at Captain Britain, who seemed to have undergone a complete transformation, Steve's first thought was Alex, who had been hiding in the shadows. A slight smile lifted his lips and he said, "I think it could be him." With that, Steve launched himself towards Dr. Lizard like an arrow from a bow. "Attack while you're weak," Alex had taught him, and Steve always remembered this mantra. Seeing Steve's actions, Peter Parker was stunned for a moment and immediately chased after him. On the other side, Brian saw the two people's actions and stopped pretending. He also rushed forward waving the sword in the stone. Chapter 427 Getting to Know Each Other. The severely wounded Dr. Lizard grew even more ferocious and fearless, his fighting power soaring. In a short while, he had Steve and the other two barely able to fight back. Even more astonishingly, Dr. Lizard's severed limbs and tail were rapidly healing, with a small stalk of new flesh already sprouting, seemingly ready for recovery in no time. "Captain, what should we do?" Peter Parker turned to look at Steve, who was in the other position, somewhat frustrated. He had no advantage in close combat, so he could only fire webs continuously, but they proved ineffective, and Dr. Lizard ripped him to shreds in an instant. Steve raised his shield, blocking Dr. Lizard's claws, his expression equally grim. Dr. Lizard's sudden surge was unbelievable, and Steve couldn't think of any solution. After a long pause, he looked uncertain and slowly said, "Let's hold on. He can't stay like this forever." Brian, who had joined the fray, was somewhat lost in the rhythm and mostly watched from the sidelines. Seeing Steve and Peter Parker helpless, Brian was secretly delighted and quickly suggested, "Actually, you could try my sword energy." "No." Three voices rang out simultaneously, two in his ears and one in his mind. Hearing the three people he knew refusing in unison, Brian was puzzled. "Why? Killing people will get you arrested." Just as Brian finished speaking, Alex's voice echoed in his mind again. Elsewhere, Steve, about to explain, noticed Brian's expression change. Knowing Alex had reappeared, he smiled wryly and shook his head, muttering, "You really think you're a babysitter? I can choose not to kill." Brian's voice weakened as he heard Alex's explanation, his confidence fading. Brian had only recently acquired the sword in the stone and couldn't control it well. The sword energy that had just severed Dr. Lizard's point tail appeared to have been unleashed by Brian, but in reality, it was secretly controlled by Alex, otherwise it wouldn't have been so exquisite. Alex chuckled and spoke again, "Don't worry, Dr. Lizard won't last long. We can wear him down slowly." "I know." Brian, though filled with resentment, could only nod. As Alex and Steve had predicted, after nearly 10 minutes of rampage, Dr. Lizard's speed suddenly slowed, and even his regenerative abilities seemed to be affected, with the growth of his severed limbs and tail halted. "I surrender." Without waiting for Steve and the others to rush over, Dr. Lizard tactfully lay down on the ground, resting his head on one paw, practically surrendering. Seeing Dr. Lizard's reaction, Steve and the others were left with a mixture of laughter and tears, wishing they could capture Dr. Lizard and give him a beating. Of course, this wouldn't happen again, at least not for a while. After the SHIELD agents took Dr. Lizard away, Alex telepathically sent the three of them an address and vanished. Since they had stumbled upon each other unexpectedly, Alex decided to introduce them to each other. As all of them were superheroes, future collaboration was inevitable. 10 minutes later, when Steve and the other two appeared in Chinatown, Alex was sitting in a luxuriously decorated private room at N's restaurant, lost in thought as he gazed at the table filled with enticing dishes. N's restaurant. Steve found the address and, upon seeing the name on the overhead plaque, his expression paused, lost in his own memories. Peter Parker and Brian, both authentic Europeans and Americans, had no experience with Chinese cuisine and, ignoring Steve, gazed around with curiosity. After a moment's pause, Steve regained his composure, greeted them, and led them to the counter. After asking Alex's location, he immediately went up. By the time the three entered the private room, Alex had regained his composure. A faint smile crossed his face, and he stood up and greeted them, meeting his fate. "Let's sit down and chat. I'm afraid you won't recognize each other without your uniforms." After the three sat down, Alex laughed again and said jokingly, "Come, let me introduce you all again. Captain America, Steve Rogers. He's been asleep for 70 years and just woke up." Alex pointed at Steve and began to introduce him. "I won't go into the details, you all probably know." After passing Steve, Alex turned his gaze to Peter Parker and asked before introducing him, "Do you mind? Since I'm here, why would I care?" Peter Parker shrugged nonchalantly. "Peter Parker, a loser," Alex said, deliberately teasing Spider-Man, pointing at Peter Parker and introducing him with a grin. He accidentally gained the power of a spider, so he became Spider-Man. Peter Parker rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He simply gave Alex an international hand signal as a riposte. Alex shook his head dismissively, turning his gaze to Brian. Just as he was about to speak, Brian spoke up himself. Brian Braddock, from England, a freshman at Empire State University. Brian stood up and introduced himself. Then, staring excitedly at Steve, he shouted, "I'm a fan of Captain America, and I've always wanted to be a superhero like you." After shouting, Brian sat back down, paused for a moment, then stood up again. He pulled out the sword in the stone and explained, "My powers come from it. And, yes, my body was transformed by Mr. Alex, the sword in the stone." King Arthur. Peter Parker lazily listened to Brian's introduction, but the name perked him up immediately. He examined the sword in Brian's hand with curiosity. "Can you lend it to me?" "Of course." Brian casually handed the sword to Peter Parker, as if handing him a chopstick. Peter Parker glanced at Brian with surprise, his slight resentment towards him instantly dissipating. However, as soon as the sword in the stone landed in Peter Parker's hands, it instantly lost all its luster, becoming useless and looking even less valuable than an ordinary sword. "Spider-Man, the sword in the stone isn't for you. Stay as a flying spider." Alex couldn't help but tease Peter Parker as he tried to uncover its secrets. He then added with a gloomy expression, "Back then, even I didn't recognize this sword. Well, now that you mention it, I feel a lot better." Peter Parker smiled, unconcerned, and returned the sword to Brian. After a while of chatting and laughing, Alex stood up, glass raised. "Today, the three of you have truly become acquaintances. We'll all be friends from now on. Let's drink." "Cheers!" Three voices rang out simultaneously, followed by a joyful chorus of laughter. Here comes the second update. Finally, it won't take until the middle of the night. Chapter 428 Training. After a hearty meal, Alex led the group out of the now destroyed Chinatown. After wandering the streets of New York for a while, an idea struck Alex. He looked at Steve and the others with a smile and said, "Come on, I'll take you somewhere." Before they could react, Alex had already activated his teleportation. Steve saw a flash of color before him, and then they were in a desolate desert. All they could see was gray-brown stone, no green in sight, let alone any living things. "Where is this place?" Peter Parker looked around, struggling to breathe, but finding no air at all, his expression agonized. "I can't breathe. I feel like I'm suffocating." "Hold your breath." Alex, startled, quickly cast a protective energy shield over them. "Wait a minute, I'll be right back." Alex vanished again, only to reappear with a breath. Alex released the air he'd brought from Earth and waited a moment, making sure it hadn't escaped. Then, addressing the group, whose faces had already turned pale, he said, "Okay, you can breathe now." "Wow, finally, we can breathe." Peter Parker took a long, satisfying breath, then turned to Alex and complained, "Alex, you almost killed us." Sorry. Alex looked at Steve and Brian, who were gradually recovering, with a guilty look on his face. "I can breathe in space, so I forgot about it for a moment. I'm so sorry." "Wait, you said this is space." Brian, with his sharp ears, immediately turned his attention to his surroundings at Alex's words. a look of disbelief on his face. Alex puffed out his chest slightly, stomping the ground beneath his feet. With a touch of pride, he said, "Welcome to Mutant Planet. You're the first guests here, Mutant Planet," Steve and the other two exclaimed in unison, their expressions matching each other's as they stared at Alex in disbelief. "Yes, Mutant Planet." Seeing the three's expressions, Alex felt a surge of pride. With a light cough, he explained, "This is a planet I built, specifically for us mutants to live on." Steve and the other two exchanged glances, looking at Alex like he was a monster. "You built a planet?" "Yes," Alex nodded affirmatively, then thought for a moment before adding, "But we've only just completed the main structure. There are still many details to perfect, like the atmosphere." Steve and the other two stared at each other, their minds blank. After a moment, they gradually regained their composure and began to survey their surroundings curiously. Compared to Earth, the planet beneath their feet, which Alex called Mutant Planet, was indeed smaller, even more desolate than Earth's most desolate deserts. However, since everything was still in its infancy, Steve and the other two believed Alex could create a perfect mutant planet. As Peter Parker and Brian embarked on their planetary adventure, Steve pulled Alex aside and whispered, "Alex, are you leaving Earth?" "Not really," Alex explained, shaking his head without hesitation. "Mutant Planet is the mutants' fallback. They won't migrate here unless absolutely necessary." Alex paused for a moment, a smile creeping onto his calm face. He confidently declared, "As for me, I can go wherever I want. No one can stop me." Steve nodded bitterly, then asked, "Has the relationship between mutants and humans really reached the point of war?" Steve had heard Carter talk about the situation between mutants and humans, but not in great detail, and he didn't fully understand the specifics. Which was why he asked. Alex was silent for a long time, then nodded and said, "It can only get worse." Steve patted Alex on the shoulder and fell silent. A quarter of an hour later, Peter Parker and Brian returned disappointed. The entire planet was made of stone. What was there worth risking? "You're back? That's great. I have something to tell you." Alex clapped his hands at the side of Peter Parker and Brian, drawing everyone's attention. Then he spoke. "I brought you here for more than just a new look. I have another purpose." "Another purpose? What?" Brian looked up at Alex with curiosity, a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Although he had obtained the sword in the stone, Alex was his guide after all, and Brian still admired him greatly. "Look, I watched your fight with Dr. Lizard earlier." As he spoke, the smile on Alex's face vanished, replaced by a deep seriousness. His aura shifted, creating a new, more stressful aura. Steve and the other two straightened their bodies and became serious. Alex nodded, observing the changes in the three men with satisfaction. He let out a low, high-pitched scold. "Honestly, your performance was abysmal." "Huh?" Steve and the other two were stunned, staring at Alex in disbelief. "Any of you could have easily taken out that scumbag Dr. Lizard, but look at the end. You've destroyed an entire New York street." Alex, reckless and like a stern teacher, pointed at Steve and the other two and began to scold them without mercy. "Especially Steve. The sewers are such a beautiful place, and you let Dr. Lizard escape." "I'm so disappointed." Steve fell silent. He knew Alex was right. The sewers were Dr. Lizard's hideout, but not where he could fully exert himself. The confined space restricted his movements. Steve was supposed to have dealt with Dr. Lizard there, but he hadn't expected Dr. Lizard to take advantage of the situation and escape, leading to the subsequent chaos. Brian was speechless. Of the three, his performance was the worst, practically more of a hindrance than a help. Even when Alex lectured him, he listened obediently and reflected earnestly. Peter Parker, however, was somewhat annoyed. He and Alex weren't particularly close, so being scolded by Alex naturally displeased him. Fortunately, Peter Parker was a man of integrity and didn't confront him directly. Instead, he explained, "I fought Dr. Lizard, and I couldn't beat him." "It's not that you can't beat him, it's that you didn't give it your all." Alex turned to look at Peter Parker, deliberately ignoring the discontent in his eyes, and explained earnestly, "Actually, you have enormous potential, but you've never seriously trained yourself. You rely solely on spider silk for a living." How pathetic. Peter Parker was about to open his mouth to defend himself when Steve, standing beside him, spoke first. He looked at Alex seriously and asked, "So what should we do?" "That's why I brought you here." Alex smiled mysteriously, pointing to the planet below. "What? Training?" Alex's smile grew wider, and between his laughter, he added, "Gravity training." Scorpio was embarrassed to say it. Chapter 429 Gravity Enhancement. Gravity Training. Alex had learned this from Dragon Ball. While the comics might be a bit unreliable, gravity training wasn't completely illogical. It was like a sumped-up version of weight training. Coincidentally, the mutant planet had just been built, and Alex could alter its gravity at will, making it the perfect place for Steve and the other two to undergo gravity training. After Alex's explanation, Steve and the other finally understood. They glanced at each other, nodded, and said, "Okay, let's get started with gravity training now." Gravity training isn't something you can do overnight. Alex shook his head, turning to Peter Parker and Brian. "It's going to take a long time to see results. You need to go back and take a long vacation first." Peter Parker and Brian were startled by this, realizing that one of them was a newspaper worker, the other a college student. Something needed to be said for them. Steve, on the other hand, was relaxed. He had no such concerns. Alex didn't keep Steve, though. After dropping the three back to Earth, Alex returned to the mutant planet to begin the next stage of his transformation. 2 days passed in a flash. Alex returned to Mystic Valley once, gave some instructions, and then continued to work on the construction of Mutant Planet. If Charles hadn't reminded him, Alex would have almost forgotten about Steve and the other two's gravity training. Ever since he couldn't reach him last time, Alex had specially erected a signal tower, similar to a base station, between Earth and Mutant Planet. This allowed Charles's telepathy to directly reach Mutant Planet and contact Alex. Receiving Charles' message, Alex regained his composure and gazed upon the utterly shattered Mutant Planet. He paused for a moment, then a flash of inspiration struck him. With a look of delight, he muttered, "1 is training, 2 is training, why not a training camp?" Alex couldn't create the adjustable gravity training room seen in Dragon Ball. His method was simple. He manipulated the magnetic field to alter the gravity of Mutant Planet. This meant that if Alex changed the gravity, the entire Mutant Planet would change accordingly. Training only Steve and the other two would be a waste. Thinking of this, Alex immediately replied to Charles, sharing his thoughts with him. Then, he quickly returned to New York, picked up Steve and the other two and headed to Mystic Valley. Charles, having just received Alex's message, was scrambling to make arrangements. The entire X Academy was in a state of disarray. What happened? Alex looked at the sea of colorful HUDs before him, bewildered, looking at Emma beside him, completely unaware that his words had caused all this. Emma turned to Alex, shrugged, and said helplessly, "It's all because of the gravity training you mentioned. The students want to go, and the X-Men don't want to miss out. No big deal, let's all go." Emma snorted and rolled her eyes. "If everyone goes, what will happen to the defenses of Mystic Valley?" Emma turned to Alex and said, her voice low, "You know, this place isn't safe right now. The last time the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister found their way here, Mystic Valley had been effectively exposed. How could Emma rest assured without sufficient X-Men guarding it?" "Okay, then, let's do it in batches, so everyone gets a share." Alex chuckled dryly, then pondered for a moment before coming up with a new idea. Emma nodded in agreement. And the wise men beside her said their goodbyes and immediately took action. Watching the crowd gradually settle down, Emma leaned in Alex's ear again and asked cautiously, "Gravity training, are you up to it?" As Alex himself had said, gravity training isn't something that can be achieved overnight. Maintaining hypergravity for a long time would be a huge burden on Alex and could even harm his body. Alex shook his head, his face light-hearted, and said, "Don't worry, I've already modified the Mutant Planet. The gravity is now twice that of Earth, and I don't need to control it." Of course, double gravity was only the beginning. If further improvement was needed, Alex would have to do it himself. Emma breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this, then looked at Alex with a worried look on her face. "That's good. I was really worried you'd force yourself." "I'm not that stupid," Alex teased, turning his gaze to Charles, who was pushing a wheelchair towards them. It looked like everything had been arranged. "Well, is everything ready?" Charles nodded and said, "All ready. Divide into 3 groups, and do gravity training in sequence." Alex glanced past Charles at the large group of people following him. He glanced at them, his brow furrowed slightly. Those who are weak or have congenital deficiencies shouldn't go for now. Train on their own at home first. Behind Charles were several frail individuals who looked as if they could be blown over by the wind. Alex didn't dare take them to Mutant Planet, they might just collapse. Don't assume mutants are superior to humans, many of them are even inferior. Among the mutants, Alex's words were like imperial decrees. Upon hearing Alex's warning, without even Charles's scrutiny, some immediately stepped forward. After the first, the second, and the third followed. In less than a minute, everyone who was supposed to stay had voluntarily left. After replenishing the numbers, Alex led a large group straight to the mutant planet. Upon entering the mutant planet, faced with a sudden double gravity, almost everyone was unable to react. They stumbled to the ground one after another, adjusting for a long time before finally standing up again, panting heavily, more exhausted than if they had just been in a fight. Get acclimated, then continue your training as usual. Alex glanced at everyone, making sure no one was abnormal, and then instructed, when you no longer feel the sensation, this stage of training is almost over. Without another word, Alex activated the teleportation and left, leaving hundreds of people staring at each other in bewilderment. After a long silence, Steve took the lead and headed to an open space to the side to start exercising. Without any equipment, Steve started with the simplest push-ups. As soon as he lay down, Steve felt the muscles in his arms tingle and numb, unable to muster any strength. He froze, holding up his body with his arms. After a while, Steve finally began to move, but his movements were extremely slow, as if each rise and fall exhausted all his strength. Seeing Steve's movements, everyone nearby followed suit. However, most of them fell to the ground like a piece of iron caught by a magnet, unable to stand up. That's a bit perverted. Peter Parker, who was a bit stronger than Steve, found it easy at first, but after 5 minutes of continuous exercise, his clothes were completely soaked with sweat, and his face was flushed, as if it were congested. Alex stood in midair, his attention focused on the entire audience, observing everyone's changes, and a smile of joy gradually appeared on his face. Chapter 430, Strange Youth. 6 months passed in a flash, and the gravity training drew to a close. Mutant planet's gravity had reached 10 times that of Earth, leaving only a handful of people able to endure. I really want to keep training like this. Feeling the pressure suddenly drop, Steve realized Alex had lifted the excess weight, and a look of dejection crossed his face. Alex, who had just arrived, sighed softly at Steve's sigh, then said with a look of resignation, 10 times the gravity is already the limit on Mutant Planet. He paused briefly, then pointed at himself. Besides, I can't hold on any longer. Take some time off, Steve. Peter Parker jumped out, patted Steve's shoulder, and said with a hint of deep emotion, besides, after training for so long, I'd really like to go back and see how Aunt May is doing. With that, Peter Parker turned his head and gazed into space, his gaze seemingly piercing the endless darkness and resting on Earth. Steve, proper training is crucial, or you'll suffer. Alex glanced at Steve, then turned to the others gathered around him, chuckling. All right, I'll take you back now. As soon as he finished speaking, Alex's telekinesis enveloped everyone, initiating a teleportation, instantly returning to Earth. After abandoning the X-Men in Uncanny Valley, Alex brought Steve, Peter Parker, and Brian to New York. The four of them chatted briefly and were about to part ways when a sudden burst of intense energy erupted in the distance. A powerful pulse swept through, knocking everyone on the street to the ground, except for Alex and the other three. Such violent energy. Alex frowned, turning his head to look in the direction of the explosion. A yellow-brown mushroom cloud rose from there, as bright and dazzling as the sun. Brian, with a look of horror on his face, instinctively drew the sword in the stone. What happened? Let's see. Peter Parker's face darkened. He raised his wrist, unleashed a stream of silk, and swung into the air. Steve was even more direct, already running, sprinting towards the scene like lightning. Watching Steve and Peter Parker vanish in a flash, Brian was also tempted, but turning to glance at Alex, who lay motionless beside him, he instinctively asked, "Are we going?" Of course, Alex nodded and replied, but he had already vanished. Go on your own. Consider it a test for you. With unparalleled teleportation speed, Alex reached the epicenter of the explosion in an instant. Amidst the rubble, a blonde youth hovered high in the air, his sharp face a look of deep fear and confusion. Human. Alex looked at the blonde, his face filled with disbelief. Before arriving, Alex had assumed the culprits were mutants, and humans, or even aliens. But he had never expected the other person to be human, a human beyond imagination. Who are you? Just as Alex was in a state of confusion, the blonde youth had already noticed him. His eyes radiated a strange, pale golden light, making it impossible to see his expression. Alex looked the blonde youth up and down, secretly on guard, and replied casually, "Alex, what about you, me?" The blonde youth was startled at the words, frowning slightly. After a long thought, he shook his head and said, "I don't remember. Could he be a lunatic?" Alex's gaze at the blonde youth grew increasingly strange. He took a deep breath and spoke again, "It's okay, the name's just a code name." Then, Alex changed the subject, gesturing to the surrounding ruins and casually asking, before chuckling with a mock chuckle, "What happened here? It feels like a hurricane. Someone tried to kill me, I fought back, and this is what happened." The blonde hesitated, searching the rubble for a moment before pointing to a spot and saying, "That's him, but I killed him." Alex followed the blonde's finger. There was nothing there, only a dark, humanoid figure. Alex froze for a moment, then thought back to the astonishing energy explosion. It dawned on him, the man had been vaporized, leaving nothing behind but this shadow. Thinking of this, Alex's heart grew heavier. The blonde before him was more powerful than he had imagined. More importantly, he seemed like a madman, a reckless madman. Anyone with even a modicum of common sense, even a supervillain, would never do something like the blonde youth destroying half a New York City block with a single blow. Just then, Alex was startled. He looked up and saw the blonde youth's aura suddenly surge, a murderous aura radiating from him, as if he were about to strike. But what puzzled Alex was that the blonde's aura wasn't directed at him, but at the person behind him. Alex instinctively turned his head and saw several figures rapidly approaching, the first one being Peter Parker in his spider suit. Alex immediately understood what was happening and quickly telepathically contacted Steve and the other two, warning them to stay away. Alex also informed the others who were approaching. Upon receiving Alex's message, Steve and the other two immediately halted their advance. However, it was clear that not everyone was convinced by Alex's plan, and many continued to advance. Alex snorted coldly at the approaching figures, inwardly mocking them. "You're asking for death," as Alex had anticipated. Before the reckless individuals could even get close, the blonde youth suddenly moved, swiftly raising his right hand. A surge of violent energy quickly gathered in his palm, then transformed into a golden shockwave that shot out with lightning speed. The two men bearing the brunt of the wave instinctively tried to dodge, but before they could even move, the wave had already pierced their bodies, then instantly vanished into vapor, leaving no trace behind. The people behind, terrified by the scene, turned and fled, wishing for wings. Unfortunately, the shockwave's speed was beyond imagination, leaving few able to escape. Even Steve and the other two at the back were nearly caught in the wave. The shockwave swept through with unstoppable force, wiping out everything in its path, human or object, instantly vaporizing and vanishing without a trace. No matter how powerful, they were powerless. Those who had luckily escaped the shockwave's path stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the blonde youth in horror, afraid to move, fearing they would attract the attention of this killer. Alex, similarly startled by the blonde's shockwave, paused for a moment before recovering. His expression darkened as he surveyed the devastation it had wrought. "Are you angry?" The blonde youth, as if sensing Alex's emotions, turned to look at him, his chiseled features a chilling indifference. "That's a bit much," Alex murmured, gazing at the blonde. "Sorry, there was a bit of trouble yesterday. Scorpio is back updating today. P.S. Guess who the blonde youth is? Chapter 431 An Unexpected Rival. Alex had seen many supervillains, but few had the same disregard for life as the blonde. After all, most villains weren't crazy, they had their own desires, and killing certainly wasn't one of them. "Do you think that's too much?" The blonde's icy face finally showed a hint of something strange, and he looked at Alex curiously. Alex's eyes narrowed, and he secretly began to gather strength. The blonde's words, combined with his expression, truly infuriated Alex. "They're just a bunch of ants. There's no point getting angry over them." The blonde's expression regained its composure, and he looked at Alex indifferently. Alex suppressed his anger and shouted, "Then what am I, you?" The blonde paused, a strange smile spreading across his face, so devilishly charming it made one's heart tremble. "We're one kind, the only kind I've ever met in this world. We're the supreme gods." Alex laughed angrily, pointing at the blonde and cursing, "Are you some monkey hired to be an idiot?" "What did you say?" The blonde, not understanding Alex's meaning, looked at him in confusion. "I say, you deserve to die," Alex roared, transforming into a streak of silver light. He instantly rushed in front of the blonde youth and delivered a powerful uppercut to his jaw, sending blood spurting from his mouth and nose. The young man soared into the air, rising hundreds of meters before finally coming to a stop. Steadying himself, the young man wiped the blood from his mouth and nose with his hand. He looked down at Alex and said calmly, "Nice strength, but not enough, not enough, is it?" Alex snorted coldly, activating teleportation and appearing unexpectedly behind the young man. His energized right leg swept out with such force that it practically cleaved the air, creating a deafening sonic boom. The young man remained unmoved, allowing Alex's whip kick to sweep across his lower back. As expected, the young man flew back, a cloud of blood gushing from his mouth. How was that kick? Alex stood back, his legs drawn back, and looked sideways at the young man, who had regained his composure. His brows raised slightly, a look of overwhelming confidence. The blond youth lifted the torn garment behind him, a look of surprise crossing his face as he nodded. "Not bad indeed." Alex was furious. While the whip kick wasn't Alex's ultimate move, it was still incredibly powerful. Yet, the blond youth only described it as not bad, which infuriated Alex. Despite his anger, Alex remained calm and even more cautious. The two attacks had made Alex realize that the blonde's strength far exceeded his expectations. No one on Earth could match him. Of course, Alex didn't count himself among them. "Who are you?" At this thought, Alex suddenly doubted the blonde's identity. After all, Earth's coordinates had been revealed months ago, and the blonde before him was most likely a powerful being from another dimension. The blonde paused, his expression aching. After a long pause, he regained his composure, a faint dark light gleaming in his golden eyes. "If you don't mind, you can call me Nothingness." Nothingness. Alex's mind raced through all the known extra dimensions, trying to determine the blonde's origins. Before Alex could finish, the blonde, calling himself Nothingness, spoke up. "I'm human, a true human." As if sensing Alex's confusion, Nothingness began to explain. "I gained my current power through an accident, incredibly powerful power." After a brief pause, Nothingness roared, its entire body ablaze with dark golden flames. At first glance, it looked like a demon from hell. Alex's face changed drastically, and he stared at Nothingness with horror. In a flash, he reappeared beside the exploding Nothingness, unleashing his psychic power to envelop it and escape. The void, shrouded in dark golden flames, was terrifying beyond imagination. The flames were materialized energy, yet they carried a heart-stopping heat that even Alex, with his energy-absorbing powers, felt a sense of fear. With such power, how could Alex dare to leave the void on Earth? He feared a single explosion would destroy the entire planet. Unfortunately, Alex's plan was unsuccessful, as his telekinesis was powerless against the void. Instead, he was consumed by the dark golden flames, leaving Alex severely injured. "Void, watch out!" Seeing that telekinesis was powerless to carry the void away, Alex acted decisively, unleashing a series of powerful punches that landed on the void with the force of wind and thunder. After the fight, Alex didn't even look at the void. He turned and walked away, transforming into a streak of light and soaring into the sky. He finished with a provocative, "Void, come after me if you dare." Seeing Alex reduced to a mere speck in the blink of an eye, the void, knowing full well it was a trick, didn't care. With a cold snort, it soared into the sky, chasing Alex, leaving behind the ruins that had been hit twice. As Alex and the void departed, the atmosphere of terror that had enveloped New York suddenly dissipated, and those hiding in the shadows emerged one after another. A large crowd soon gathered on the ruins, and it was clear these people were no ordinary people. SHIELD bore the brunt of this massive attack on New York. Director Nick Fury personally visited the scene and immediately sought out Steve, asking, "Did Alex say anything?" Steve's expression was bitter, and he shook his head, saying nothing. Fresh off his training, before Steve could unleash his ambitions, he was dealt a heavy blow by an unimaginable foe. This dealt a heavy blow to Steve, dampening his already exhilarating spirits. Seeing Steve in this state, Nick Fury was about to offer a few words of comfort when the Fantastic Four arrived, led by Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, whose face was pale and solemn. "Mr. Nick Fury, I wonder how much SHIELD knows about this Mr. Void?" Hearing Reed's questioning tone, Nick Fury rolled his eye, spread his hands, and said helplessly, "Sorry, I know nothing." "Nothing?" Reed looked at Nick Fury in surprise, as if trying to discern Nick Fury's sincerity. After a moment's hesitation, he turned to Steve, greeted him, and asked again, "Mr. Steve, did Alex say anything?" Steve knew this was not the time to be upset. He calmed himself and shook his head, saying, Alex didn't say anything. Steve hesitated again, thought for a moment, and added, but judging by Alex's reaction, this Mr. Void is probably very powerful. Alex himself isn't completely sure. What? Alex isn't sure. Nick Fury almost jumped at the words. He turned to look at Steve, his single eye flashing with disbelief. In Nick Fury's opinion, Alex was the most powerful person on Earth. Steve looked up at the sky, his face solemn. I saw someone in the comments section talking about the problem of broken chapters. I won't tell you the reason, as everyone understands. Fortunately, the broken chapters are all in the public chapters. I will upload the public chapters to the group later, so everyone can read them in the group, but after reading, remember to continue to support Scorpio. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 432, Slap in the Face. In the pitch-black darkness of space, Alex streaked across the lunar surface like a meteor, hurtling toward the more distant Mars. The energy radiating from the void was so staggering that even after leaving Earth's surface, Alex remained apprehensive. Barely half a minute after Alex's departure, the void, enveloped in dark golden flames, broke through Earth and soared into space. It surveyed its surroundings, then, without hesitation, pursued the direction Alex had vanished. A moment later, Alex had flown out of Mars' orbit and arrived in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. This region is filled with countless asteroids, some dozens of times larger than the Moon, while others are smaller than the island of Japan. It's worth noting that this was the main source of Alex's original construction of the mutant planet. The asteroid belt, crammed with countless asteroids, creates a chaotic force field, making it impossible for Alex to gain a foothold without his magnetic field control abilities. Alex chose this location for his battleground, precisely to maximize his geographical advantage. As Alex had anticipated, after catching up, the void didn't immediately enter the asteroid belt. Instead, it stopped far outside, gazing at Alex from afar, its face expressionless. What? You don't dare come in, Alex sneered at the void, his eyes filled with wariness. Though the void had stopped, Alex couldn't detect a trace of fear in his face or eyes, which made Alex wary. Sure enough, as soon as Alex finished speaking, the void soared brazenly into the asteroid belt. Unlike the cautious Alex, the void was even more reckless, practically charging headfirst. To Alex's astonishment, all the asteroids approaching the void were pushed back by an invisible force, as if they were willingly making way for the void. Alex's face took on an unprecedented solemnity, and his gaze towards the void grew even more fearful. Alex could have pushed the asteroids away like the void, but not with the same ease. Furthermore, as they advanced, the dark golden flames emanating from the void grew more intense, threatening to incinerate all nearby asteroids. Without a second thought, Alex flashed and launched the first attack. He was terrified if the void continued to unleash its power. Unaware of the dark golden flame's origins, Alex hesitated to engage in a close-range attack, instead unleashing an energy blast. Following the blast, the steel ball magnetic cannon remained silent. The dark golden flames emanating from the void were truly extraordinary. As the energy blast approached, the flames suddenly sprang to life, leaping upwards and swallowing the wave whole. Swallow? Alex felt a headache. Having this ability was fine, but facing an enemy possessing it, Alex was completely helpless, like Apocalypse. Rubbing his brow, Alex looked at the motionless void, muttering to himself, I hope physical attacks will work. As soon as he finished speaking, the magnetic steel balls shot out like a flash of lightning. To Alex's inexplicable surprise, the steel balls pierced the dark golden flames unscathed. Just as they were about to strike void, a hand suddenly reached out, 5 fingers opening and grabbing the steel balls, and Alex lost his electromagnetic induction. Interesting, Void smiled faintly, opening his palm and looking down at the steel balls in his palm. As if struck by a machine tool, the 10 steel balls transformed into thin steel sheets in the blink of an eye, gleaming with a silver metallic sheen. Alex looked at Void with a sullen expression, his mind racing. But after much thought, Alex realized that nothing could harm Void except close combat. However, seeing the dark golden flames surrounding Void, Alex hesitated again. Just as Alex was feeling awkward, the Void made his choice. With a wicked smile, the Void transformed into a streak of dark golden light, In the blink of an eye, it was at Alex's side. Raising its hand, it delivered a straight punch, muttering nonchalantly, "Now, my turn." Alex reacted instantly, but even then, he couldn't dodge the punch. The Void's speed was beyond imagination. Without any special abilities, its sheer speed felt faster than light. The power of the Void's punch was immense, and even with its energy absorption, Alex's formidable frame struggled. A sweet sensation rippled through his throat, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Alex felt a strange feeling. Over the decades, Alex had fought many men and faced all kinds of danger. But surprisingly, he had never vomited blood. He had never expected that today, his first blood would be lost in the Void. Staying off mid-battle isn't a good habit. The Void seemed completely in combat mode, completely losing its previous apathy and casual demeanor. Noticing Alex's daze, it didn't retreat. Instead, it launched another barrage of attacks, sending Alex careening backward. Alex endured dozens of blows before finding an opening and quickly retreating. He watched the calm Void from a distance, recovering from his injuries, his heart still pounding. Unexpectedly, the Void paused again, watching Alex recover from his injuries. Only when Alex had fully recovered did he attack again. "Let's continue, Psycho." Alex mentally labeled the Void a psychopath, and then engaged him in combat. Alex rarely displayed his melee prowess, but his close combat abilities were formidable. Back then, even the sheer Empire's Gladiator King was no match for Alex in a sword fight. Compared to Alex's exquisite fighting techniques, Void's attack seemed absurdly simple, the tropes of a street thug. Every punch and kick was straightforward, relying solely on his immense physique and superhuman strength. But if you underestimate Void for that reason, you'll be the unlucky one. Because sometimes simplicity is most effective, and fighting is all about practicality. Even the most elaborate techniques can't compare to a powerful straight punch. Alex underestimated Void, and he paid a heavy price for it. His entire face was distorted, his once handsome features transformed into a shoehorn-like face, covered in craters. Of course, if Alex suffered, Void wasn't much better. His face was completely sunken, his mouth, nose, and eyes smushed together, unrecognizable as human. The battle between the two entered a white-hot stage. The relentless attacks made them completely lose their minds and unable to recover from their injuries. They could only leave behind two strange faces. Fortunately, there were no other creatures in the entire asteroid belt except the two of them. Otherwise, if they saw their faces, they would either faint from fear or laughter. Scorpio has had some problems in the past 2 days and is working hard to adjust. I'm sorry. P.S. Regarding the broken chapters, I have said it once before and I will say it again. The broken chapters are basically in the public chapters. Scorpio has sent the public version, complete, to the group. Everyone can read it in the group. Thank you for your support. Chapter 433 Evil Personality. The man who called himself Robert Reynolds smiled wryly, pointed to his heart, and added quietly, "That guy just now was my evil side." A flicker of fear flashed across Robert's eyes, and his body trembled. After a moment, he continued, "It's cruel and bloodthirsty. You must stop it." Alex looked at Robert with a strange expression, not entirely convinced. However, secretly, Alex had already telepathically contacted Nick Fury on Earth. On the dilapidated streets of New York, Nick Fury suddenly communicated with Alex. Confusion filled his single eye. He turned to look at the people around him and asked, somewhat baffled, "Robert Reynolds, does anyone know this guy?" "Who?" Peter Parker glanced at Nick Fury, curious. "Robert Reynolds, who is this?" "Alex just sent me a message, asking me to find information on this person." Nick Fury spread his hands, giving a look of complete ignorance. Of course, Nick Fury immediately assigned tasks and focused his efforts on searching for Robert Reynolds. Alex wouldn't look for this person for no reason. Reed crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. After a moment's silence, he suddenly realized, this Robert Reynolds must be the Void, so Alex is looking for information on him. Nick Fury was shocked and hurriedly urged him. The United States has a large population, and there are many people with the same name. Finding the target is not easy, even with the image of the Void. It took over 10 minutes for the SHIELD agents to lock on to one of them, Robert Reynolds. Drug addict? Thief? Nick Fury looked at the information the agent sent, his face full of disbelief. "Are you sure this guy is the one who almost destroyed New York just now?" Hearing Nick Fury's words, Reed and others also gathered together, stunned. "No, this Peter Parker suddenly cried out, reaching out to snatch the information from Nick Fury's hands and pointing to the last piece of information. Here, Dr. Hank Pym's laboratory. 2 months ago, Peter Parker, having become Spider-Man after being bitten by a mutant spider, was highly sensitive to information about laboratories and quickly noticed the anomaly. Robert Reynolds' information ended there, and then there was a blank, as if he had vanished. He reappeared today, destroying nearly half of New York. Nick Fury reacted immediately and ordered someone to find Dr. Hank Pym. Go find Dr. Hank Pym immediately. In this world, the power of scientists is unimaginable, and every scientific discovery can have unimaginable consequences. From the Red Skull to Dr. Lizard and Dr. Reed, Nick Fury was almost certain that the Void's appearance was connected to Dr. Hank Pym. Actually, this Dr. Hank Pym was an SHIELD agent. When Apocalypse spread the plague worldwide, Nick Fury had taken Hank Pym with him to search for a cure. While Nick Fury was busy trying to uncover the origins of the Void, another chaotic battle erupted in the asteroid belt. The Void seemed to have returned. Alex hadn't anticipated that Robert Reynolds, who had just been chatting peacefully, would suddenly go berserk and transform into the Void. He was caught off guard and sent flying by the Void's punch, crashing through dozens of asteroids before finally coming to rest. "What a fucking lunatic," Alex screamed, rising to his feet. He turned to gaze at the oncoming dark golden light, his face thick with rage. "If you want to fight, then go ahead," Alex's fury erupted. Unafraid of a head-on confrontation with the Void. After several consecutive collisions, the Void's aura suddenly weakened, and Robert Reynolds' voice rang out again. "Help me." Having learned his lesson, Alex didn't dare approach again. Standing at a distance, he stared at Robert Reynolds and asked hesitantly, "What should I do?" "Robert, you can call me Bob." Robert smiled weakly, then shook his head, his face twisted in pain as he screamed, "I don't know." Before he could finish his words, dark golden flames erupted again, and the Void appeared. "FCK," Alex cursed softly, and before the Void could react, he attacked first. Alex's attack was swift, but the Void's reaction was even faster. With a single raised hand, it parried Alex's blow, then said with a leisurely smile, "He's just a coward." "Ignore him." Alex, having already foreseen the situation, quickly retreated after his attack was blocked. As the Void's words echoed in his ears, Alex couldn't help but think of Bob. Compared to the Void, Bob was indeed a bit inferior. His thoughts raced, and Alex and the Void exchanged blows for dozens more rounds, neither able to defeat the other. However, as the battle continued, Alex was surprised to find that the power of the nothingness seemed to be weakening. Could it be Bob? Alex dodged the nothingness's fists, his eyes constantly scanning its head as an idea crossed his mind. He felt that his own strength alone was insufficient to defeat the nothingness. Only if Bob rose up and suppressed the power of the evil nothingness could Alex hope to win. After hundreds of rounds, the nothingness's momentum suddenly faded, and Bob reappeared. Alex, without waiting for Bob to speak, quickly expressed his thoughts. But to Alex's dismay, Bob was so frightened that he peed himself and cried out "Impossible." Then the nothingness reappeared. No mistakes, just one song, one post, one content, one book, one forum. The Void appeared with a sneer, then turned to look at Alex and said contemptuously, "He's just a coward." "Stop dreaming. In fact, he's even worse than a coward." Alex looked at the reappearing Void, his eyes as if seeing through the Void's eyes into his inner alter ego, Robert Reynolds. He complained indignantly, "You say it's impossible without even trying. What a waste." "Ha ha ha, waste." Hearing Alex's curse, the Void burst into laughter, its hearty laughter seeming to vent something. "Yes, he's really worse than waste." Meanwhile, on Earth, Nick Fury finally waited for Dr. Hank Pym. "Doc, do you know who he is?" Seeing Hank Pym, Nick Fury immediately handed over a photo of Robert Reynolds, his eyes fixed firmly on Hank Pym. Hank Pym was stunned and said uncertainly, "He seems to be the thief who broke into my laboratory 2 months ago. He just destroyed half of New York." Seeing Hank Pym admitted it, Nick Fury did not keep him in suspense and went straight to the point. "Now tell me, what happened?" Hank Pym was shocked and shook his head to deny. "What? I don't know. This has nothing to do with me." Scorpio did not find the specific inventor of the Sentinel potion, and put it on Dr. Hank Pym for the needs of the plot. I hope everyone will not delve into it. Chapter 434 Sentinel Potion. Nick Fury looked at the frightened Hank Pym, comforted him expressionlessly, then handed over the information in his hand and said in a deep voice, Take a look at this. I think you will remember something. Hank Pym's eyes narrowed slightly. He reached out to take Robert's detailed information, looked at it for a few times, and finally locked his eyes on the last entry. I really don't know what happened, Hank Pym argued angrily, waving Robert's information in his hands. This guy ran into my laboratory to steal things, and now he's in trouble. Do you still want me to be responsible, Dr. Hank Pym? Please calm down. We don't mean that. Reed laughed dryly and intervened between the two of them, turning his head to explain to Hank Pym, who was still indignant. We just want to know why our Robert has become like this. Maybe we can find a way to deal with him. After hearing Reed's explanation, Hank Pym gradually calmed down, and his face with a hint of wrinkles was clouded. I really don't know why he has become like this. Hank Pym knew he had to say something, and after a moment of silence he added, he broke into my laboratory to steal things, but unfortunately he didn't succeed, and didn't steal anything. Did you touch anything? The speaker was Peter Parker, who was more sensitive to this aspect. Hank Pym shook his head subconsciously, then seemed to recall something. Oh, right, he seemed to have a drug addiction at the time, and drank a bottle of Sentinel Potion. Sentinel Potion? What is that? Hearing this unexpected term, everyone's attention turned to Hank Pym. Hank Pym turned his head to glance at Captain America beside him, hesitated for a moment, and explained, I've always been very interested in the Super Soldier Serum. The Sentinel Potion is a replica of the Super Soldier Serum. How effective is it? SHIELD has been dedicated to researching the Super Soldier Serum, but Nick Fury had no idea that Hank Pym was also secretly researching it and had even made a major breakthrough. Are there any more? Hank Pym smiled bitterly and shook his head, his expression a little embarrassed. It can only increase the user's strength by a small amount, and it can't change their physical condition. After a brief pause, Hank Pym continued to explain, the Sentinel Potion was a failure. I had already planned to destroy it before that. The bottle that the thief drank was the last one. Can it be remade? Nick Fury frowned, his single eye flickering slightly, revealing a sharp glint. Hank Pym nodded, looked at the dilapidated blocks around him, thought for a while and added, let me tell you in advance, the Sentinel can't be so powerful. Maybe it's something else. Reed pinched his chin and said thoughtfully, but this Sentinel Potion should also have a lot to do with it. At least it's an inducement. Hank Pym shrugged and said nothing more, turned and left to prepare to make the Sentinel Potion again. At that moment, Alex's voice echoed in Nick Fury's mind, his tone filled with deep resentment. Get a psychiatrist. There's a lunatic here who needs treatment. Huh? Nick Fury was a bit confused by Alex's thoughts, and after a moment's pause, he came back to his senses. What the hell is going on, Alex? This guy is a psychopath, a split personality. Alex's voice faded for a long moment before returning, a hint of fatigue etched in his voice. One's called the Void, ridiculously strong. And the other's called Robert Reynolds, ridiculously weak. Listening to Alex's explanation, Nick Fury seemed to understand. He passed on Alex's request and shared all the information he had gathered on Robert Reynolds. Sentinel Potion? Let me ask. After listening to Nick Fury's explanation, Alex was silent for a moment, then threw back a sentence and focused on dealing with the reappearance of the Void, his face a look of agony. As time passed, the Void's disappearances became more and more frequent. Facing the Void and Bob one after another, Alex was driven mad. Alex dodged the Void's attacks and casually asked, Void, did you really drink the potion to become like this? Oh. You know everything? The Void paused, looking up at Alex as he flew to the side, a hint of mockery on his expressionless face. But do you think a potion could really create me like this? Alex shook his head and said seriously, it's impossible, so I don't believe it. You seem quite clever. The Void chuckled, stopping his attacks and actually chatting with Alex. The Sentinel Potion was just a coincidence that opened up a universe that was about to be annihilated. That's even more ridiculous. Alex frowned, looking at the Void with amusement. The Void shrugged and said nonchalantly, that's the truth. The energy generated by the annihilated universe eventually poured into his body, and I was born. Then you're really lucky. Alex already believed the Void's words, because the Void had no reason to deceive him. Thank you. The Void bowed modestly, then flashed and instantly appeared beside Alex, raising his hand to deliver a punch. The story ends, the battle continues. Alex, ever on guard, activated teleportation the moment the Void's body vanished, narrowly avoiding the Void's powerful punch. Unwavering in his resolve, the Void turned and charged at Alex again. As Alex and the Void engaged in another fierce battle, Nick Fury brought in several experts, including a psychiatrist and 2 psychiatrists. Unrelated sentence fragment: no mistakes, no mistakes, no content, no mistakes. There's no doubt that nothing stems from Robert's own fragility and low self-esteem. After listening to Nick Fury's brief introduction, the 2 psychiatrists immediately identified the root cause. Under the impact of powerful forces, Robert was unable to control them, and his dark, evil side emerged, giving rise to the nothingness personality. Nick Fury patiently listened to the experts' explanations, then glared at them coldly. So, what's the solution? Reducing or alleviating stress in the individual's living and working environment, and improving living conditions. The experts exchanged glances, then chirped their own treatment plans. Give the patient sufficient satisfaction and a sense of security, communicate with the patient more often, and guide them to build friendships with kind people. Listening to the experts' words, everyone present couldn't help but curse. Come on. This guy's playing with meteors in space. I need to relieve stress, I need satisfaction and security. Okay, can you offer some constructive advice? Peter Parker suppressed a smile and interrupted the experts. The experts paused, looking at each other in bewilderment. After a long silence, they shook their heads in unison. That's all we can do. The key lies with him, Mr. Robert Reynolds. Go to hell. Alex, who happened to be telepathically connected, overheard the experts' words and roared angrily, sending all of them away. Out of sight, out of mind. The origin of the Sentinels. Then it was time to solve this troublesome Sentinel. Chapter 435: Sentinel Potion. Nick Fury looked at the frightened Hank Pym, comforted him expressionlessly, then handed over the information in his hand and said in a deep voice, "Take a look at this. I think you will remember something." Hank Pym's eyes narrowed slightly. He reached out to take Robert's detailed information, looked at it for a few times, and finally locked his eyes on the last entry. "I really don't know what happened," Hank Pym argued angrily, waving Robert's information in his hands. "This guy ran into my laboratory to steal things, and now he's in trouble. Do you still want me to be responsible, Dr. Hank Pym, please calm down. We don't mean that." Reed laughed dryly and intervened between the two of them, turning his head to explain to Hank Pym, who was still indignant. "We just want to know why our Robert has become like this. Maybe we can find a way to deal with him." After hearing Reed's explanation, Hank Pym gradually calmed down, and his face with a hint of wrinkles was clouded. "I really don't know why he has become like this." Hank Pym knew he had to say something, and after a moment of silence he added, "He broke into my laboratory to steal things, but unfortunately he didn't succeed, and didn't steal anything." "Did you touch anything?" The speaker was Peter Parker, who was more sensitive to this aspect. Hank Pym shook his head subconsciously, then seemed to recall something. "Oh, right, he seemed to have a drug addiction at the time, and drank a bottle of Sentinel Potion." Sentinel Potion? What is that? Hearing this unexpected term, everyone's attention turned to Hank Pym. Hank Pym turned his head to glance at Captain America beside him, hesitated for a moment, and explained, "I've always been very interested in the Super Soldier Serum. The Sentinel Potion is a replica of the Super Soldier Serum. How effective is it?" SHIELD has been dedicated to researching the Super Soldier Serum, but Nick Fury had no idea that Hank Pym was also secretly researching it and had even made a major breakthrough. "Are there any more?" Hank Pym smiled bitterly and shook his head, his expression a little embarrassed. "It can only increase the user's strength by a small amount, and it can't change their physical condition." After a brief pause, Hank Pym continued to explain, "The Sentinel Potion was a failure. I had already planned to destroy it before that. The bottle that the thief drank was the last one. Can it be remade?" Nick Fury frowned, his single eye flickering slightly, revealing a sharp glint. Hank Pym nodded, looked at the dilapidated blocks around him, thought for a while and added, "Let me tell you in advance, the Sentinel can't be so powerful. Maybe it's something else." Reed pinched his chin and said thoughtfully, "But this Sentinel Potion should also have a lot to do with it. At least it's an inducement." Hank Pym shrugged and said nothing more, turned and left to prepare to make the Sentinel Potion again. At that moment, Alex's voice echoed in Nick Fury's mind, his tone filled with deep resentment. "Get a psychiatrist. There's a lunatic here who needs treatment." "Huh?" Nick Fury was a bit confused by Alex's thoughts, and after a moment's pause, he came back to his senses. "What the hell is going on, Alex? This guy is a psychopath, a split personality." Alex's voice faded for a long moment before returning, a hint of fatigue etched in his voice. "Once called the Void, ridiculously strong. and the others called Robert Reynolds, ridiculously weak. Listening to Alex's explanation, Nick Fury seemed to understand. He passed on Alex's request and shared all the information he had gathered on Robert Reynolds. Sentinel potion? Let me ask. After listening to Nick Fury's explanation, Alex was silent for a moment, then threw back a sentence and focused on dealing with the reappearance of the Void, his face a look of agony. As time passed, the Void's disappearances became more and more frequent. Facing the Void and Bob one after another, Alex was driven mad. Alex dodged the Void's attacks and casually asked, "Void, did you really drink the potion to become like this? Oh. You know everything?" The Void paused, looking up at Alex as he flew to the side, a hint of mockery on his expressionless face. "But do you think a potion could really create me like this?" Alex shook his head and said seriously, "It's impossible, so I don't believe it. You seem quite clever." The Void chuckled, stopping his attacks and actually chatting with Alex. The Sentinel potion was just a coincidence that opened up a universe that was about to be annihilated. That's even more ridiculous. Alex frowned, looking at the Void with amusement. The Void shrugged and said nonchalantly, "That's the truth. The energy generated by the annihilated universe eventually poured into his body, and I was born." "Then you're really lucky." Alex already believed the Void's words, because the Void had no reason to deceive him. "Thank you." The Void bowed modestly, then flashed and instantly appeared beside Alex, raising his hand to deliver a punch. The story ends, the battle continues. Alex, ever on guard, activated teleportation the moment the Void's body vanished, narrowly avoiding the Void's powerful punch. Unwavering in his resolve, the Void turned and charged at Alex again. As Alex and the Void engaged in another fierce battle, Nick Fury brought in several experts, including a psychiatrist and 2 psychiatrists. Unrelated sentence fragment: "No mistakes, no mistakes, no content, no mistakes." There's no doubt that nothing stems from Robert's own fragility and low self-esteem. After listening to Nick Fury's brief introduction, the 2 psychiatrists immediately identified the root cause. Under the impact of powerful forces, Robert was unable to control them, and his dark, evil side emerged, giving rise to the nothingness personality. Nick Fury patiently listened to the experts' explanations, then glared at them coldly. "So, what's the solution?" "Reducing or alleviating stress in the individual's living and working environment, and improving living conditions." The experts exchanged glances, then chirped their own treatment plans. "Give the patient sufficient satisfaction and a sense of security, communicate with the patient more often, and guide them to build friendships with kind people." Listening to the experts' words, everyone present couldn't help but curse. "Come on. This guy's playing with meteors in space. I need to relieve stress, I need satisfaction and security. Okay, can you offer some constructive advice?" Peter Parker suppressed a smile and interrupted the experts. The experts paused, looking at each other in bewilderment. After a long silence, they shook their heads in unison. "That's all we can do. The key lies with him, Mr. Robert Reynolds." "Go to hell." Alex, who happened to be telepathically connected, overheard the experts' words and roared angrily, sending all of them away. Out of sight, out of mind. The origin of the Sentinels. Then it was time to solve this troublesome Sentinel. Chapter 436 Sentinel. What a bunch of rubbish. Alex, after sending the experts away, remained indignant, his voice brimming with anger, resounding like thunder in the ears of Nick Fury and the others. Nick Fury and the others exchanged bewildered glances, until Reed finally suggested, "Why don't you ask Charles? He's quite knowledgeable on this." Alex, delighted, didn't even bother to thank him before immediately turning his attention to contacting Charles, who was in charge of the Uncanny Valley. When Robert appears, try to use telepathy to block the Void's personality. After listening to Alex's explanation, Charles briefly pondered a plan, pausing before elaborating. "The Void is Robert's dark and evil side. So, what you need to do is, while Robert is awake, completely block out the evil and darkness within him. That way, the Void should be prevented from appearing again." Alex pondered for a long moment, then said uncertainly, "The Void's telepathic power is incredibly powerful. I'm afraid I can't block it." Alex had previously attempted to use telepathy to limit the Void's abilities, but it had failed. The Void's telepathic power was no less powerful than Alex's. Charles fell silent for a long time after hearing this, and spoke again after a full quarter of an hour. "The Void and Robert are one, and the Void's power is also Robert's power. Perhaps we can find a solution by addressing this aspect. What are the specifics?" Alex was distracted, dealing with the void in the asteroid belt while keeping in touch with Charles. The void's power, weakened for a while, was now slowly recovering, while Bob's appearances were becoming less frequent and shorter. If this continued, Alex would have to fight tooth and nail. Telepathy, telepathy, Charles repeated twice in succession. Then, without waiting for Alex to ask, he explained, "We can attack simultaneously. On the one hand, try to block the void, and on the other, use telepathy to lure Robert into an outburst. Once Robert takes the initiative and controls the majority of the power, the void's power will inevitably weaken. The chances of success with this two-pronged approach are very high." "Understood," Alex said excitedly, immediately withdrawing his attention and focusing on dealing with the void. But to Alex's dismay, Bob didn't appear for the next half hour. Waiting for him, as if sensing Alex's impatience, the void slowed its attack, a hint of scorn on its stern face. Alex's brow furrowed, his eyes darting around the void's head, attempting to deliver a powerful blow, thereby knocking Bob out. Before Alex could act, the void's voice rang out again, "Don't worry, he won't appear again." "Why?" Alex felt a wave of worry at the void's reassurance. Without Bob's help, facing the ever-increasing power of the void, Alex had no choice but to fight tooth and nail. Alex was met with a fist from the void. This time, Alex couldn't dodge. His entire body arched, streaking out of the asteroid belt like a meteor, plummeting into the emptiness of space. Alex tried to control his body, to stay in the asteroid belt, but it felt as if dozens of rockets were strapped to his body, propelling him out. Without the complex gravitational environment of the asteroid belt, Alex no longer needed to control his magnetic field to stabilize the surrounding gravity, but the void was also liberated. As expected, the void flew out of the asteroid belt, following Alex closely. Its dark golden flames suddenly rose, adorning the void like a dark golden sun, dazzling and blinding. "Damn it, let's fight," Alex roared, charging at the void. Not to be outdone, the void quickly rushed over to meet it. Just as the two approached, Alex suddenly vanished from his position, replaced by a black hole hundreds of meters wide. This was undoubtedly Alex's ultimate move, transforming into a black hole. The void had clearly not anticipated Alex's potential, and it felt like it was stuck in a quagmire. The more it struggled, the deeper it sank. Enraged, the void launched a frenzied attack on the black hole, causing it to tremble violently, as if on the verge of collapse. Alex, transformed into a black hole, was terrified. This sheer power was even more terrifying than Thanos's. Fortunately, though the black hole trembled, it could still hold out for a while. Alex, transformed into a black hole, didn't need to worry about attack or defense, concentrating his full attention on penetrating the mind of the void. The power Alex unleashed was unparalleled. Meanwhile, the void had become somewhat frantic from being trapped in the black hole, and its mind was in turmoil. However, his efforts paid off, and Alex finally penetrated the void's mind. Not wanting to waste a moment, Alex immediately sought out Robert Reynolds, hidden in the deepest abyss of the void's heart. Bob, meanwhile, huddled in a corner, surrounded by pitch black, as if he were dead. "What a nuisance," he muttered. Alex, no longer bothering to persuade, used his telepathy to stimulate Bob's mind, forcing him to possess immense confidence. Stimulated by Alex's telepathy, Bob slowly rose to his feet, and a brilliant light suddenly emanated from his body, instantly dispelling the surrounding darkness. Sensing Bob's transformation, Alex grew increasingly energized and continued to exert his strength. Gradually, Bob's frail frame grew stronger, his aura growing more formidable. The terrifying pressure began to shake the void's mind. Finally, "It's working," Alex glanced at Bob, who had regained his composure, and immediately divided half his attention to try to block Bob's dark side. Even with Bob's explosive power, the task remained elusive. The void's counterattacks posed considerable challenges to Alex, whose mental strength was beyond imagination. However, under Bob's increasingly powerful predatory attack, the void's available power dwindled until it was completely suppressed by Alex, unable to recover. However, Alex was troubled by how to deal with the void. Charles's idea was to block the void. But Alex, having watched the X-Men films, knew that a lockdown wouldn't completely solve the problem and would likely lead to a painful experience similar to Dark Phoenix's. But Alex had no other options. He couldn't erase the void's existence. Just as Alex was at his wit's end, a strange voice echoed in his ear, "Leave him to me." Alex regained consciousness and stared in disbelief at the figure within his body. Without the dark golden flames, The void looked far more majestic, with a touch of righteousness. Although it was the same person, this one gave Alex a strange feeling. It wasn't Void, nor was it Bob. Are they creating a third personality again? Alex muttered to himself. As he recovered his body, he looked warily at the unfamiliar Robert Reynolds. Who are you? I'm Robert Reynolds. Robert Reynolds looked at Alex calmly, a gentle smile on his face. From now on, I will uphold world peace in the name of the Sentinels. Chapter 437, Treatment of Sentinels. Alex stared at Robert Reynolds in astonishment, his eyes quizzical. Don't doubt it, I'm perfectly normal now. As if sensing Alex's doubts, Robert Reynolds coughed lightly and began to explain. I've suppressed the void. Now I'm a brand new me, Sentinel. Alex, startled and unsure, didn't fully believe the Sentinel's words. After a moment's hesitation, he asked tentatively, are you sure you've suppressed the void? Before the Sentinel could answer, Alex quickly added, and are you sure it won't reappear? The void couldn't be killed, but Robert Reynolds could be controlled. Alex preferred to monitor Robert Reynolds, ideally freezing him completely to minimize the possibility of the void reappearing. After hearing Alex's question, the Sentinel fell into a long silence. After a long pause, he replied with a gloomy expression, I'm sorry, I can't guarantee it won't appear. He paused for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and slowly said, of course, I will try my best to control my emotions and prevent it from taking advantage of the situation. Do you know how much damage it has caused to Earth? Alex stared at the Sentinel with a serious expression, and scolded him in a deep voice. The void erupted in New York, destroying nearly half of the city. Then, in a battle with him in the asteroid belt, the meteorite impact caused immense damage to Earth, even with the help of superheroes like the X-Men. The Sentinel shook his head, then nodded. Alex looked at him in confusion, and said, I don't know, but I can make amends and take responsibility for everything it has done. How will you take responsibility? Alex frowned, looking the Sentinel up and down with undisguised contempt. It was clear that the Sentinel's primary purpose was destruction, and it would be of no use to the devastated Earth. Earth faces many threats, and I would be a formidable force. Before the Sentinel could finish, Alex interrupted him, his words sternly, compared to the limited combat power you can provide, I'm more worried about its threat. Faced with Alex's questioning, the Sentinel was speechless. Just as the two fell silent, Alex suddenly received a telepathic message from Charles. What's wrong, Charles? Glancing at the expressionless Sentinel, Alex secretly contacted Charles. Nick Fury needs to see you. Charles was merely a messenger. Alex was puzzled, but he contacted Nick Fury immediately. Why are you looking for me, now? You and him should have finished fighting. SHIELD began monitoring space at the outset of the battle. When Alex and the Sentinel ceased fighting, Nick Fury was the first to receive the message. Alex sensed Nick Fury was up to something. With a light cough, he asked bluntly, just tell me, no need to beat around the bush, what's the situation with the void? Nick Fury, knowing he couldn't hide it from Alex, gave a dry laugh and got straight to the point. Robert Reynolds should have recovered, right? You could even guess that, Alex asked in disbelief. Nick Fury shrugged and casually explained, according to the experts, there's only one possibility. Without waiting for Alex to react, he added, the government wants to protect Robert Reynolds. Alex was about to complain when he heard the second part, and he froze. A sudden surge of rage erupted, and he yelled at Nick Fury, you know nothing, and yet you dare protect him? Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? He's a ticking time bomb. There's no telling when it could go off. There's nothing we can do. Humanity needs him. Nick Fury shook his head bitterly, his tone resigned. Alex was a little puzzled. What do you mean? Faced with more and more people with superpowers, especially powerful mutants like you, humans need their own heroes, a superhero that can shock everyone, Nick Fury explained slowly in a hoarse voice, with an expressionless face and a calm expression in his one eye. Robert Reynolds is their choice. Damn, aren't you afraid that he will go crazy? Alex was a little amused. What humans did was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. If the void breaks out, let alone the United States, the entire Earth may not be able to be preserved, then don't let him go crazy. Nick Fury shrugged, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. These are the original words of the government counselor. I'm just passing them on. Do you all think you are God? After listening to Nick Fury's words, Alex did not answer again. He muttered, looked up at the sentry opposite, thought for a while and passed a message to Nick Fury. Anyway, we mutants are ready to move to the mutant planet. So let you humans go crazy, and don't regret it then. Alex ignored Nick Fury and turned to the Sentinel, saying expressionlessly, "You're lucky. The US government has secured your bailout, so you can go back now." The Sentinel was startled, then a smile slowly crept across his expressionless face. "Thank you." Alex ignored the Sentinel, waved his hand, and teleported back to Earth. Upon returning to Earth, Alex immediately sought out Charles and began relocating the mutant home. As long as the Sentinel remained on Earth, he would remain a potential threat. Alex simply didn't dare allow the mutant home to remain. When Charles heard the news that the US government was recruiting the Sentinels, his face turned livid. He lost his gentlemanly demeanor and burst into a tirade of curses. "Are they all pigs? Maybe they're worse than pigs," Alex grumbled, then changed the subject back to the relocation of the mutant home. "Forget about them, let's take care of ourselves first." Charles muttered a few words and quickly busied himself with contacting people. A moment later, Emma and the others returned to the Mystic Valley and also got busy with their work. Alex never got involved in the details of the work, so he really couldn't get involved. After much deliberation, Alex decided to go to New York to meet Tony Stark, now transformed into Iron Man. It had been a long time since Alex had seen his nephew. Immediately, Alex left a message, left the busy crowd, and teleported directly to Stark Tower in New York. To Alex's surprise, Steve, Nick Fury, and the others were all there, even the Sentinels, seemingly discussing something. "Why are you all here? What are you doing?" Alex flashed to Steve's side. His eyes swept over the Sentinel and finally fell on Iron Man Tony Stark, whose only head was exposed. "Tony, this outfit looks good, thanks." "I think so too." Tony accepted Alex's compliment with a frivolous smile, then pointed at the Sentinel and explained nonchalantly, "We are here to deal with this problem." Chapter 438, Training Iron Man. Seeing Alex, the Sentinel smiled faintly and took the initiative to explain, "I have suppressed the void deep within my mind. Theoretically, it can never reappear, even the strongest fortress can be breached. To protect humanity from the threat of the void, the Sentinel has decided to erase everyone's memories of the void, including his own." Tony Stark jokingly continued, his gaze fixed on Alex. "This way, the void will be equivalent to non-existence, and the Sentinel's dual personality will be cured." "Is this really possible?" Alex, recalling his forgotten days, felt a little downcast. His gaze shifted between Reed, Tony, and the other highly intelligent individuals, his face filled with suspicion. Reed, with a stern expression, looked up at Alex, nodded, and said solemnly, "Theoretically, it's possible. Perhaps I can help." Ultimately, with Alex's help, the void was forgotten by the world, and Robert Reynolds officially joined the US government as the Sentinel, becoming its only active superhero. The Sentinel was the US government's ultimate weapon. Naturally, the government wouldn't allow him to parade around like most superheroes. Instead, they kept him well supported, rarely allowing him to show his face, let alone take action. Of course, that was all later, and had little to do with Alex. He was currently nestled on a sofa in Tony Stark's living quarters atop Stark Tower, his face slouched with a look of contentment, his head tilted as he gazed across at Tony, who sat solemnly across from him. Steve and Nick Fury sat on another sofa nearby, their faces lightly smiling. Alex, holding a goblet of red wine in one hand, gently swayed it, while his other hand gently tapped the back of the sofa. He looked at Tony with a half-smile, honest now. Half an hour earlier, the high-spirited Tony Stark, unbearable at the lectures of Alex and his three elders, had defiantly challenged them. As expected, Tony Stark received a harsh lesson, his confidence severely shattered. The original Iron Man suit consisted of a sturdy metal shell and limited firepower. After returning to New York, Tony upgraded the suit's materials and firepower. With this configuration, Tony was confident he could outmaneuver most, but he didn't expect to stumble. Losing to Alex was acceptable to Tony. After all, Alex was Earth's strongest. Losing to Captain America was also somewhat acceptable to Tony. After all, Captain America had been transformed with a super soldier serum and possessed a powerful shield. But losing to Nick Fury was truly unacceptable to Tony. Nick Fury hadn't undergone any enhancements, the Infinity Formula had merely granted him immortality. "You don't accept it?" Alex knew what Tony was thinking, seeing his expression. "Do you realize where you lost?" Tony relaxed slightly, his eyes glancing between Steve and Nick Fury. An expression of resignation filled Tony's face as he tried to make a defense, but he didn't know where to begin. "Okay, Let's talk about the hardware first. Alex sighed lightly, and after attracting Tony's attention, he spoke. Your armor is indeed powerful, but the material is not top-notch, so it was easily penetrated by Nick's bullets. Imagine what would happen if your armor was made of the material of Steve's shield. Tony's eyes suddenly lit up when he heard this, but dimmed again in an instant. He shook his head and said, impossible. The material of Captain's shield was a complete accident and cannot be copied at all. Then try to get close. Isn't adamantium good? Alex leaned back on the sofa, tapped his crossed legs and looked at Tony, and said slowly, as for the firepower of the armor, you are an expert, study it yourself. Without waiting for Tony to thank him, Alex slowly sat up, his expression became serious. Now, let me tell you about the software problem, that is, yourself. Feeling Alex's seriousness, Tony also put away the smile on his face and became nervous. I remember I once enhanced your body, Tony. Alex's face was expressionless, his calm tone concealing a hint of anger. Before Tony became Iron Man, Alex had worried about him and had specially enhanced his body. But now, it seemed, Tony had long since abandoned it, and his current condition was barely better than that of an average adult. I'm not looking down on your Iron Man suits, but they're just external artifacts. The key is to rely on yourself. Seeing Tony's indifferent expression, Alex sighed and offered earnest advice. In other words, as the Iron Man suits continue to upgrade, their effectiveness will continue to increase, and your body simply can't withstand their increasing strength. Tony clearly disagreed, and Alex, impatient to explain, I have a way to adapt to the new Iron Man suit. You can't. Alex snapped, his voice suddenly rising, startling everyone present. Without giving Tony a chance to speak again, Alex muttered, reaction speed. Your consciousness simply can't keep up with a fast-paced battle, and neither can Jarvis. Alex's words made Tony's heart skip a beat, instantly recalling his recent battle with Alex. That incredible speed hadn't been enough for him to react to, and even Jarvis couldn't keep up. Tony was silent for a long time, his grim expression gradually easing. He looked up at Alex. What should I do, Steve? I leave it to you. Alex turned to Steve with a smile, teasing, even though Tony might be a bit shady, he's still our nephew. We can't just ignore him. Nephew? Tony heard the name again, resentment welling up in his heart, but he felt helpless. He'd just been punished for resisting. Steve and Nick Fury exchanged a glance, chuckled, and nodded. They then turned to Tony and said seriously, I don't ask for much. Everything is my call. That's quite a lot, Tony muttered inwardly, not daring to react. He simply nodded in agreement. Seeing the two agree, Alex stood up from the sofa, strode over to Tony, and gestured for him to stand. We've finished our lesson. Now it's time to solve your problem. What? Tony asked subconsciously, standing up as he was told. Then, realizing what he was doing, a smile broke across his face. Alex calmly extended his hand, slowly approaching Tony's body. Carefully, he quickly located the shell fragments coursing through Tony's veins. Okay, problem solved, Alex chuckled, then exerted force. All the shell fragments instantly shattered into tiny particles, which pierced Tony's skin and flew out. Having solved the problem with the shell fragments, Alex also healed a dent in Tony's chest. Without the threat of shell fragments, Tony naturally no longer had to carry around an arc reactor. Thank you. With a threat gone, Tony felt a sense of relief. He thanked Alex sincerely, his face serious. Alex replied nonchalantly, nothing, nephew. Tony's expression fell, and he felt a sense of despair. Noticing Tony's reaction, Alex laughed exaggeratedly. Not many people would dare to tease Iron Man like that. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 439 The Invincible Hulk. After teasing Iron Man, Alex didn't get to watch Steve train Tony, as Charles arrived with a message that everything was ready. After bidding farewell to Steve and the other two, Alex returned to the Mystic Valley. The large open space in front of the X school was packed with people, and various supplies were piled nearby. Although Mutant Planet had become habitable after Alex's long-term transformation, it was only slightly better than a desert on Earth. Therefore, if the mutants wanted to settle down, they would need a lot of supplies, at least food. Everyone in Mutant Home is willing to move to Mutant Planet, Emma approached with a smile upon seeing Alex's return. Her expression dimmed, and she added sadly, "But the other mutants haven't agreed. They're probably just waiting and watching." Alex's goal with this relocation plan wasn't just mutant home, but all mutants worldwide. Alex, unfazed, smiled and nodded, saying, "It's better not to go. It saves us the trouble." After a brief pause, Alex added, "Once we're well established, we can take them on. We'll even have the upper hand." Emma chuckled and patted Alex's shoulder. She scanned the room, looking at him with some concern. "With so many people and supplies, is it okay?" The upcoming teleportation was interplanetary, and with so many people and supplies, Emma was genuinely concerned about Alex's ability to make it. Alex, however, looked relaxed and nonchalant, saying, "Don't we still have the Tesseract?" The Tesseract was the Infinity Stone, and combined with Alex's teleportation, it was a breeze and a pleasure. The Tesseract was truly powerful. In just half a day, Alex had transported everyone and everything in the mutant home to Mutant Planet, even uprooting Academy X and transplanting them entirely there. Now, only a handful of powerful X-Men, such as Charles, Alex, and Logan, possess special abilities remain on Earth. Naturally, everyone has arrived at Mutant Planet. Hearing Alex mention the name Mutant Planet again, Audrey frowned and couldn't help but complain, "Change it. Mutant Planet sounds terrible." Audrey's words resonated with almost everyone, who admittedly thought the name was too lame. "Okay, what do you guys think?" Alex readily agreed, not particularly concerned with the name. After much debate, a new name for Mutant Planet was finally decided. Vivian Lee's suggestion, Paradise Island, was a hit with everyone. Paradise Island, a mutant paradise. After handing Paradise Island over to Emma, Alex returned to Earth with Charles and the other X-Men. "Are we still going to stay here?" Looking at the emptied Mystic Valley behind him, Logan, dressed in baggy jeans, looked a bit annoyed. "Let me be clear, I don't want to stay here anymore." Logan, a playboy by nature, had been staying in Mystic Valley for a while, and it was driving him crazy. Alex shrugged and chuckled. "Of course not. I found a place in New York. It'll be the X-Men's base on Earth." Alex had asked Tony for this base, originally a farm on the outskirts of New York. "That's great. I love New York, and the women." It was Deadpool who spoke. After Charles's persuasion, Deadpool had joined the X-Men. However, Deadpool was a bit of a jerk, and few of the X-Men liked him. As soon as Deadpool spoke, everyone turned their heads, no one paying attention. Deadpool paid no attention to any of this, blabbering on as if no one was around. "When I get back to New York, the first thing I'm going to do is look for Lucy. Oh, her tiny waist drives me crazy." And, seeing Deadpool about to continue, Charles' face darkened and he shouted, "Shut up, Deadpool." Deadpool paused, turned to Charles, and offered a half-hearted apology. "Sorry, I'll keep my voice down." Deadpool seemed oblivious to Charles's utterly darkening face, mumbling to himself in a low voice that seemed more like a fantasy. Alex chuckled nonchalantly, then teleported everyone to the X-Men's new base. Alex had only recently acquired the land from Tony, leaving them with no time to build anything. So, the X-Men were greeted by a thriving farm, with several sturdy black cattle leisurely grazing in the grass. "Alex, I'm afraid you'll need to go back to Paradise Island." Charles, understanding the situation, turned to Alex and suggested, "We have professional experts who can quickly build a qualified base, an underground base." "Okay, I'll be right there." Alex chuckled, then vanished in a flash. Shortly after Alex vanished, a roar echoed from afar, accompanied by the faint sound of heavy artillery fire. "What's going on?" Logan immediately became alert, his nose twitching slightly, his expression becoming serious. "An army, and a strange giant creature." As Logan finished speaking, Charles' voice rang out, "A fully armed American army, chasing a green monster." "Green monster? A slime?" Deadpool interjected playfully. Charles ignored Deadpool, frowning deeply. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone, alert. They're coming this way. Who are we going to fight?" Alex secretly began to gather his energy, ready to strike at any moment. Charles hesitated, unable to distinguish between the good and the bad. He had learned nothing more from the American army than the Green Monster's name. The Green Monster, for some reason, had blocked Charles's telepathy, leaving him only with its unparalleled brutality, making communication difficult. As he hesitated, Alex returned with a large group of men. Noticing the strange atmosphere, Alex looked at Charles in surprise. What's going on, Charles? The American army is chasing a green monster coming this way. Charles immediately threw the question to Alex upon seeing him appear. We're just wondering what to do. Green monster, Alex muttered in wonder, then turned his attention to the distance. He immediately saw the giant green figure in midair and exclaimed, Hulk. Yes, that's what the American soldiers call it. Charles also knew the Hulk's name and was a little surprised by Alex's exclamation. Alex, do you know him before? Alex chuckled and nodded, saying, I've met him once, so we should help him. Alex's body glowed faintly red, and an energy shockwave was ready to be fired at any moment. Alex shook his head, rejecting Alex's suggestion. No rush, let's wait and see. The Avengers had all appeared. Chapter 440. Alex had seen 2 solo Hulk movies in his previous life. Compared to the slightly odd first one, he preferred the second, which was straightforward and full of exciting action. Now, Alex saw 2 familiar faces from the movie, General Ross, sitting in a military jeep, and his beautiful daughter, Betty Ross, Bruce Banner's girlfriend, beside him. General Ross, with his white hair and beard, scowled at the leaping Hulk, his fierce gaze gleaming with murderous intent. Open fire. Kill him at all costs. After being tormented by the Hulk for so long, General Ross finally issued this order, no longer concerned about Hulk's safety. You can't do this. Betty, completely focused on the Hulk, suddenly snapped out of her thoughts when she heard Ross's command. She grabbed the pager from Ross's hand and sternly shouted, He's Banner, Bruce Banner. You can't hurt him. The usually cold General Ross paid no attention to his daughter's words. He shook Betty's hands away and gave new orders into the pager, missiles ready, sonic weapons activated at any time. Meanwhile, the frantic Hulk had lost much of his rationality, his mind focused solely on destruction. Anyone who dared to challenge him was easily crushed. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen severely damaged tanks surrounded the Hulk. That big guy is quite powerful. Deadpool, standing beside Alex, his sharp eyes taking in everything on the battlefield, paused for breath as he watched the Hulk smash a heavily armored tank into a lump with a single punch. Deadpool wasn't the only one who could see the battlefield. The others were stunned by the Hulk's ferocious demeanor and unparalleled strength. Deadpool's slightly teasing voice brought them back to their senses, their faces etched with fear. No one present, save Alex, was confident they could survive such a ferocious attack from the Hulk. Even Logan and Deadpool, with their remarkable resilience, felt a sense of unease. Are we really just going to watch? Charles inquired curiously, seeing Alex's lack of movement. It seems the US military has something special prepared that might harm the Hulk. Alex, familiar with the plot of the movie and even more confident in the Hulk's strength, shook his head and said nonchalantly, Don't worry, that big guy is formidable. What the US military has is nothing but toys to him. Seeing Alex's admiration for the Hulk, Charles seemed to understand. However, Charles remained silent, following Alex's instructions and acting as a qualified spectator. The battle between the Hulk and the US military continued, a nearly one-sided massacre. The US military's armor-piercing rounds couldn't penetrate the Hulk's skin, and the tank's artillery fire barely managed to stagger him. Sonic attack vehicles were also brought out, but far from harming the Hulk, they only fueled his rage and fury. With a deafening roar, the Hulk stomped his feet, leaping high like a rocket, then swooped down like an eagle, slamming into one of the sonic attack vehicles. Under the Hulk's impact, the massive sonic attack vehicle was no match for a paper model, instantly reduced to shattered pieces, punctuated by a few painful screams. Father, this can't go on. Betty, her hands resting on the Jeep's steering wheel, stared at the frantic Hulk ahead. Turning to her father, whose face was sullen, she anxiously pleaded, Let me try. Maybe I can persuade it. General Ross's body trembled. He turned to look at his daughter and asked in a low voice, Are you sure? Not sure, Betty said unexpectedly bluntly. Just as General Ross's expression was about to change, she added, But there's always hope, isn't it? Looking at his daughter, General Ross hesitated. He couldn't guarantee the Hulk's safety, let alone Betty's. Therefore, General Ross preferred that his daughter leave, completely away from this madman. Seeing her father's hesitation, Betty coughed softly. Just as she was about to speak, a huge shadow fell from the sky, crashing down in front of the military jeep, less than 5 meters away from Ross and his daughter. It's God's will, Betty, instead of surprise, rejoiced. She shook the shackles from her hands, her gaze fixed on the nearby Hulk, her deep eyes filled with deep affection. Unfortunately, Betty's glances were in vain, For the Hulk was the Hulk, and Bruce Banner was Bruce Banner, another dual personality. Much like the Sentry, General Ross cast a bitter glance at his beloved daughter, his mind fixed on the Hulk, his muscles tensed, fearing that the Hulk would suddenly smash them into pieces with a single blow. General Ross's fears proved to be correct, as the Hulk actually raised his fists, aiming for the nearby military jeep. Just then, a burst of gunfire rang out, and amidst the din, a voice echoed, "Big man, over here." Alex, keeping his eye on the battlefield, was on the verge of teleporting just as the Hulk's fist was about to land. Unexpectedly, at the critical moment, a sudden and unexpected opponent appeared. Recovering from his shock, Alex followed Hulk's gaze and spotted another familiar face, the foreign mercenary from the movie, the Future Abomination. He clutched a machine gun, furiously firing at Hulk. The Future Abomination's wielding of hatred immediately caught Hulk's attention, and Hulk immediately abandoned Ross and his daughter and turned to charge at the Future Abomination. The Future Abomination, currently just an ordinary human mercenary, possessed considerable agility, but was powerless against the Hulk's overwhelming strength. With a single punch, the Hulk sent the Future Abomination flying, sending him sprawling against a tree. Alex, watching the fight, remained silent, glancing at the dying Future Abomination before returning his attention to the Hulk. According to the plot, the Hulk would then be summoned by Betty and regain consciousness. Unrelated sentence fragment. September 16, 2016. Everything was as expected. After being untied by General Ross, Betty really started running and rushed towards Hulk, yelling, "Bruce, wake up, is this woman stupid?" Alex stared at Betty, who rushed to Hulk in amazement, his eyes full of disbelief. However, the facts are always unexpected. The Hulk, who was so violent just now, gradually calmed down in the roar of Betty. A trace of tenderness flashed in his eyes that were filled with brutality, as if he recognized Betty in front of him. The power of love is so great. Deadpool did not miss any opportunity to complain, and his voice was also weird. Alex chuckled, and there was a hint of joy in his eyes when he looked at Hulk. A rational Hulk is a good Hulk. Chapter 441, Battle of Brooklyn, 1. At that moment, a bullet flew, aimed squarely at Betty. Hulk instinctively hugged Betty to his chest, blocking the bullet with his massive arm. The bullet didn't hurt Hulk, but it sent him, having just regained some sanity, spiraling back into a frenzy. "You're asking for death?" Alex still held his fire, his gaze following the bullet's trajectory to the Future Abomination, who slumped against a tree, a pistol clutched in his hand. The Hulk, enraged once more, was unstoppable. In a matter of moments, the entire American force, including all its weapons, was destroyed by Hulk, resulting in heavy casualties. The Future Abomination was practically minced. After venting his fury, Hulk, clutching Betty, who had fainted from shock, leaped into the air and vanished into the distant mountains and forests in an instant. "You're not chasing?" Charles asked, puzzled, as he observed Alex's still inertness. Alex smiled calmly, shook his head, and said, "Don't worry, he'll be back." Without waiting for Charles to speak, Alex pointed to the mutants he'd brought back from Paradise Island and said, "I'll leave these people in your care. Build the base as quickly as possible." With that, Alex's teleportation vanished. He reappeared at the edge of the battlefield where the battle had just taken place. A figure flew over from the horizon. It was none other than Iron Man, Tony Stark. "I'm late." Seeing Alex, Tony hesitated for a moment before flying over. Without giving Alex a chance to speak, he asked, "What happened here?" "As you can see, a major battle." Alex pointed to the piles of ordnance debris below, violently dismantled by the Hulk, a strange smile on his face. Tony glanced at him with a startled look, then turned to Alex, saying in disbelief, "You did it?" "Of course not. It was a giant green creature, the Hulk. You let him go." Tony imagined the giant green creature Alex was talking about. Suddenly, a sudden realization struck him, and he turned to Alex, saying with a look of gloating satisfaction, "If Steve finds out, you'll be in trouble." Alex's face froze at that, and he glared at Tony fiercely, saying meaningfully, "Nephew, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want, okay?" Sensing the faint murderous aura emanating from Alex, Tony shuddered and nodded hurriedly, "Don't worry, I know nothing." With that, Tony turned around and vanished into the sky in a flash of lightning. "You're a good person." Alex sighed softly and chuckled as he watched Tony disappear. A week passed in the blink of an eye. The X-Men's new base was taking shape, but the Hulk seemed to have vanished without a trace. Even the US military had suddenly gone silent, ceasing even the most basic search. As for the outside world, there was no news at all. This is a bit odd. Tony Stark frowned as he looked over the information he had compiled in Stark Tower. Given the military's concern for the Hulk, it was truly unbelievable that there had been no movement for several days. Alex was also here, enjoying the good wine provided by Tony. He drank it and said slowly, "What's the rush? Just wait, is that Hulk really as powerful as you said?" Tony put away the virtual light screen, held the wine glass and sat next to Alex, and asked curiously, "The angrier he is, the stronger he is." "I've always been curious about where his power comes from." Alex rolled his eyes and replied unhappily, "You ask me, who should I ask?" Steve joined the conversation with a serious expression, his voice extremely serious. "Alex, are you sure you want to subdue the Hulk?" Steve belongs to SHIELD, but now he is also Tony's fighting coach, and spends most of his time in Stark Tower, so Steve knows very well what Alex is planning and his plans for this period of time. "It's not about conquering him, I just want to be friends with him," Alex explained, shaking his head. Then, with a serious look on his face, he added, "The Hulk's destructive power is incredible. He's invincible in group fights. Of course, most importantly, the Hulk is a very good tank." Alex still remembered the Avengers movie where the Hulk single-handedly took down an entire alien warship. As the three of them were talking, Nick Fury's voice suddenly rang out in the hall. "Nick Fury, I'm warning you again. Don't hack into my system next time." Tony didn't pay attention to what Nick Fury was saying. He immediately complained, his face filled with anger. Of course, Nick Fury ignored Tony's complaints and started talking to himself. "The military is making a move. They are deploying a large number of troops to Brooklyn, including tanks, helicopter gunships, and a lot of heavy firepower. Ross should know that these are useless against the Hulk." After hearing Nick Fury's words, Alex frowned tightly, and then seemed to remember something and spoke again. "By the way, why don't they send out the Sentinels? It seems that guy hasn't made a move since joining the US government." Nick Fury smiled bitterly and shook his head, his dark face full of depression. "The military has been silent for a while. It seems that they are preparing some secret weapon. They seem very confident, so there's another trump card," Alex muttered, and the image of the Abomination suddenly flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but shout out, "Could it be the Abomination?" But on second thought, Alex realized that the Abomination couldn't appear yet. Without the Hulk's blood, the mercenary injected with a super soldier serum would be at the level of Steve before. As Alex's thoughts wandered, Tony's voice reached his ears. "Little bug has word. Bruce Banner has appeared." Alex knew the Hulk would appear in Brooklyn, and that a major battle would occur there, but he couldn't be sure of the exact time. So, Alex had already set up surveillance. Tony was in charge of electronic surveillance, while Spider-Man Peter Parker would conduct visual inspections, as some areas couldn't be seen by electronic surveillance. "Let's go and see. We can't miss this," Alex chuckled and stood up. He activated teleportation, instantly transporting everyone in the hall to Brooklyn, next to Peter Parker in his Spider-Man uniform. Without asking Peter Parker, Alex glanced around and immediately spotted Bruce Banner. Betty Ross, arm in arm, followed beside him. "The main character has appeared. Isn't it time for the other supporting characters to appear too?" Alex muttered to himself, carefully following behind Bruce Banner. Alex's goal for this trip wasn't just to befriend the Hulk, but also to obtain his blood. Chapter 442, Battle of Brooklyn, 2. Hulk's blood is a very magical thing. In the movie, Abomination became Abomination because he got Hulk's blood. Of course, Alex wanted to get Hulk's blood not to become Abomination, but to study the source of Hulk's power. With this purpose in mind, Alex followed Bruce Banner and Betty into the laboratory in the movie. Of course, Alex was disguised so that no one could find him. Seeing Banner, the somewhat crazy scientist couldn't wait to pull Banner to prepare for the experiment. Banner was slightly resistant, but under Betty's hopeful eyes, he still lay down on the experimental bed obediently. The experiment had just begun when Alex sensed a strange atmosphere outside. Looking closely, General Ross surrounded the area with a large group of people, and it looked like they were going to raze the entire Brooklyn to the ground. The US government is truly insane. They actually let Ross do this, Alex sighed, turning to look at Banner, who was pinned to the lab bed. The serum injection had twisted his face into terrifying, ferocious form, and his eyes were gradually tinging green, a sign that the Hulk was about to appear. Alex immediately relayed the message to Steve and the others hiding outside. Attention! The Hulk is about to appear. Shortly after the message was announced, a bright white beam shone through the glass into the lab, and Ross's voice carried quickly through the loudspeaker to Banner and the others. Betty glanced out the window, then returned her gaze to Banner. The treatment seemed to be working, but Banner remained in a state of near change. Under such circumstances, Betty insisted on continuing the treatment, commanding in a deep voice, "Continue." Unfortunately, a burst of bullets shattered the tense atmosphere in the lab, sending Banner, resting on the bed, spiraling out of control. His body rapidly expanded, transforming from Banner to the Hulk in an instant. The enraged Hulk destroyed the entire lab in a matter of seconds. Fortunately, he remembered Betty and watched over her. At that moment, General Ross, aware of the Hulk's presence, ordered an attack. Dozens of heavily armed soldiers stormed the lab from all directions. Frightened, the Hulk fled through a window, clutching Betty, followed by a dozen American soldiers. Suddenly, Alex was alone in the lab, and there was another man lying on the floor. Glancing at the fallen scientist, Alex lashed out with a swift, lightning-fast blow. In the blink of an eye, he incinerated all but one of the Hulk's blood samples in the lab, leaving only one bag as trophy. The Hulk's blood samples were precious, and Alex couldn't bear to leave them to the U.S. government. Given their whims, they might create an army of Hulk clones, which would be a real problem. As for Abomination, Alex didn't care, he was just a supporting character. What's going on outside? After cleaning up, Alex contacted Steve and the others again to inquire about the Hulk's progress. Something's happened, Steve replied quickly, his tone somewhat urgent. The Hulk's been stopped by a green monster who's even stronger than him. Alex's original plan was for Iron Man, Captain America, and Spider-Man to work together to lure the Hulk away after the Hulk appeared, firstly to prevent the destruction of Brooklyn, and secondly to take the opportunity to release the Hulk and boost their reputation. However, before the three could make a move, the Hulk was stopped, and the plan was naturally thwarted. Stronger than the Hulk, Alex's face was filled with disbelief. "Are you sure this isn't an illusion, Steve?" On another Brooklyn street, Steve and the other two hid in a corner, watching two green-skinned monsters wrestle each other not far away. Their expressions were grim. "Come and see." Alex approached the battlefield, filled with wonder. Seeing the green-skinned monster, unlike the Hulk, 1,000 horses raced through his mind. What the hell is going on? How did the Abomination appear? Alex had already taken all of Hulk's blood samples. There was no way the Abomination could appear, especially at this time. Just as Alex was stunned, a loud bang was heard. Alex looked up and saw that the Hulk's massive body had been sent flying by the Abomination's punch, leaving a large crater on the ground. The Abomination was a full size larger than the Hulk, with strange protrusions of bones and a dense, scaly skin. He looked even more like a monster than the Hulk. The Abomination's strength was incredibly powerful, even the Hulk was no match for him. "Come on, Hulk." Watching the Hulk shake his head and stand up, the Abomination grinned, his ferocious face becoming even more terrifying. Finally regaining consciousness, Hulk, seemingly remembering the situation, casually smashed a nearby police car in half, grabbed one in each hand, and with a roar, charged at the Abomination. Donning his boxing gloves, the Hulk seemed even stronger. With two powerful punches, he knocked the Abomination to the ground. He then pressed forward, pinning the Abomination down, and repeatedly struck the Abomination's head with his fists. In a short while, the boxing gloves vanished. Seeing his now bare fists, the Hulk seemed stunned. The Abomination below, taking this opportunity to regain his composure, spat, and, looking sideways at the Hulk, said with mockery, "Is that all you've got?" The Hulk, now completely irrational, roared furiously at his words, raising his fists to smash into the Abomination's head. But at that moment, the Abomination kicked with his right foot, sending the Hulk flying. "This guy is way more powerful than the Hulk." Peter Parker glanced in the direction the Hulk had disappeared, then turned back to the swiftly running Abomination, his face filled with shock beneath his mask. "If that kick had landed on me, I'd have been ripped in two." Tony swallowed and added fearfully, "Too violent, not for me." Steve remained silent, but his expression revealed another blow. "You guys help rescue them, I'll follow and see." Alex pondered for a moment before making a decision. The Abomination's appearance had exceeded Alex's expectations. Alex wasn't sure if the Abomination was the military's secret weapon, so a rash move would only lead to trouble. Steve and the other two, reluctant, nodded in agreement. With the three of them, they couldn't intervene in the fight between Hulk and Abomination. If they weren't careful, they would be killed by the two's extraordinary strength. After arranging the three of them, Alex immediately chased after Abomination, while secretly using telepathy to reach out to General Ross, hoping to get some information from him. The result he got was a bit ridiculous. After all the twists and turns, he was actually connected to him. Chapter 443, Battle of Brooklyn, 3. Abomination is still the mercenary nearly pulverized by the Hulk, but unlike in the movie, he was transformed in a military laboratory and injected with the Hulk's blood sample. Alex never imagined that the Hulk's blood sample in the military's possession might actually be related to him. It was shortly after Alex returned to Earth from the Chaos Dimension and unexpectedly encountered Bruce Banner in his Hulk form in New York. The Hulk, enraged, beat Alex without a word. Furious, Alex took the Hulk to a desert, where they engaged in a fierce battle, ultimately resulting in a draw. Alex was practically powerless against the Hulk, ultimately saving his own skin by piercing his body with a steel ball electromagnetic cannon. However, Alex had no idea that this very battle would give the US military access to the Hulk's blood sample, and even to Alex's. Fortunately, Alex's blood sample couldn't be concentrated or reconstructed, otherwise Alex would have been in serious trouble. After understanding the situation, Alex sighed with a strange expression and turned his gaze to the Abomination, who was running wildly across the rooftops in the distance. A helicopter was following behind him, and a barrage of bullets was hurled at him. Never mind, just kill him, Alex pondered for a moment, then made a decision. Alex wasn't sure what his blood sample had done to the Abomination, but just in case, he couldn't bear to leave him behind. Just as Alex was about to move, he looked up and saw the Abomination suddenly leap up and fly towards the helicopter. Just at that moment, Hulk jumped out from below and grabbed the Abomination, as if trying to pull him down. Just like in the movie, the Abomination grabbed the helicopter first. The immense weight of the two far exceeded the helicopter's capacity, and they staggered downwards. Exactly like in the movie, Alex grumbled again, teleporting to appear next to the helicopter. Before Alex could react, an invisible force field suddenly appeared, restraining the out-of-control helicopter, along with the Abomination and the Hulk, and slowly bringing it to the ground. Alex turned and looked ahead. The Fantastic Four stood there in their blue uniforms. Invisible Woman Susan slowly stood up, sighing, her face filled with anxiety. "You're here?" Alex wasn't surprised to see the Fantastic Four. Brooklyn might be a bit far from Manhattan, but the commotion caused by the Hulk and the Abomination was significant, and the Fantastic Four couldn't help but react. The Fantastic Four also noticed Alex, and compared to Alex's indifference, they were more nervous. Reed turned and looked around, looking at Alex sternly. He asked in a deep voice, "Does this have anything to do with you?" Reed was willing to help Alex because he sympathized with mutants. But if Alex actively harmed humans, Reed would definitely not allow it. "You've misunderstood," Alex shrugged, pointing sarcastically at General Ross and his group as they emerged from the helicopter. "Ask him about that." Reed glanced at General Ross and fell silent. Reed knew all too well the filth of the US military. As everyone stared at each other in bewilderment, Hulk and Abomination regained consciousness. Ignoring the others, they engaged in a silent brawl. Hulk, far from reaching his limit of rage, was no match for the powerful Abomination. He was quickly knocked to the ground by Abomination. Abomination then grabbed Hulk by the neck, lifted him up, and slammed him against the wall. Abomination growled hoarsely, "You don't deserve this kind of power, Hulk." Hulk struggled, but his strength was outmatched by Abomination's. His hands were countered, and even his chest was pierced by bone spurs from Abomination's elbow, drawing blood. Thanks to Susan's help, the helicopter landed safely, and Betty emerged unharmed. Without the thrill of Betty's life-or-death crisis, Alex was genuinely worried about the Hulk's unleashing force. With this thought in mind, Alex coughed lightly to attract everyone's attention. He then pointed at the Abomination and the Hulk and said calmly, "Are you just going to stand by and watch? Are you not going to take action?" Reed looked at Alex in surprise. They were well aware of the Hulk and the Abomination's power. It would be difficult for the Fantastic Four to deal with them. Reed hadn't taken action because he was waiting for Alex. Alex rolled his eyes, pointed at the impassive General Ross and the nervous Betty beside him, shook his head, and said casually, "That's their business. I can't interfere, I'll do it." Johnny the Human Torch, a man of great patience, became even more indignant at Alex's prevarication. With a soft shout, his body erupted in orange flames, and he rushed towards the abomination, a stream of fireballs. Susan screamed in fear, but it was too late. She turned to look at Reed, her face brimming with hope. Reed glanced sideways at Alex, then nodded bitterly. He reached out and grabbed the abomination's shoulders, which were now ravaging the Hulk from 100 meters away, wrapping his arms around it as if to trap it. The moment Reed struck, the thing, with its rumbling gait, charged towards the abomination. Having finally encountered two beings of his own size and equally bizarre appearance, the thing eagerly awaited a sparring match. After the thing, Susan immediately joined the fray, controlling her invisible force field and unleashing a supersonic blast. Johnny's fire blast struck first. The abomination roared under the attack and turned back, just in time to spot Red's outstretched arm. With a jerk of his arms, he gave up on trying to punish the Hulk for the moment and tore Reed's arm off. With a powerful tug, it shrank into a thread, seemingly snapping. Just look at the 6-9 book forum. At that moment, Susan's ultrasonic blast also came crashing down. Ultrasonic blasts are similar to Black Bolt's infrasound, a special energy attack that is extremely difficult to avoid. They are similar in function to the sonic attack vehicle General Ross used against the Hulk. Under the ultrasonic blast, the abomination cried out in pain, instinctively loosening his grip and tightly covering his ears. The Hulk also took the opportunity to break free from the abomination's grip, but unfortunately, he was also within the ultrasonic blast range and reacted almost identically to the abomination. The thing rushed forward at the right time, his thick stone fist carrying a strong wind, and struck the abomination in the head. The abomination was caught off guard, and the blow tilted his head, and his entire body was sent flying. The abomination flew out, but also took the opportunity to get rid of the threat of the ultrasonic shock wave. He raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, stared fiercely at the Fantastic Four headed by Reed, and said in a cold voice, "Here come 4 more who are seeking death." 2 chapters are published together, everyone pay attention. Chapter 444, Battle of Brooklyn, 4. Alex stood in the corner, watching the defiant abomination with a sneer of disdain. "You might not be very capable, but you're quite arrogant." Others might not know the depths of Abomination's abilities, but Alex knew it all. Even though he was beating the Hulk like a dog, the Hulk could easily defeat Abomination. The key was that the Hulk could improve infinitely, growing stronger the angrier he got. But Abomination didn't have that ability. His strength couldn't be increased. His only real strength was that he retained the intelligence and character of a mercenary. However, no matter how powerful his intelligence was, it was nothing compared to sheer force. So, if Abomination and the Hulk continued fighting, Abomination would undoubtedly be the last to fall. "I think the Abomination is quite formidable. Reed and the others might not be a match for him." Alex's words were barely finished when, accompanied by a snort, Tony's frivolous voice echoed in his ear. "Look, Reed's been twisted like a tangle. I'm really worried." Before Alex could speak, Steve's voice rang out, his voice thick with worry. "Alex, are you really not going to take action?" The destruction caused by the Abomination and the Hulk wasn't as extensive as in the movies, but many civilians were still affected. "Why don't we go out and help? More people means more power." Peter Parker always adhered to the motto, "With great power comes great responsibility." Standing by and watching the show like this wasn't his style. Alex smiled calmly, nodded casually, and said, "Okay, you guys go in and try too. Let's test your strength." Alex hadn't considered taking action from the beginning, unless the Hulk attacked him, but it was clear that the Hulk wasn't in the mood. Hearing Alex's words, Steve and the other 2 exchanged glances, their eyes brimming with fighting spirit. Even the playboy Tony Stark seemed intrigued. "Fight on, don't worry. I'll cover your losses." Alex spoke again, bolstering the 3 men's resolve. As Alex had predicted, Steve and the other 2, without hesitation, charged into the fray. The Abomination was locked in a fistfight with the Thing. In a pure contest of strength, even the Hulk in his normal form couldn't match the Abomination, let alone the Thing, who was even slightly less powerful. However, the Thing was stubborn and resilient. Even as his stone arm threatened to crumble to dust, the Thing refused to retreat, battling the Abomination again and again. Nearby, Reed, Susan, and Johnny fretted, but their attacks proved helpless. Their attacks only managed to harass the Abomination and buy the Thing a moment to breathe. Just then, Steve and the other 2 charged forward. Tony Stark, clad in his Iron Man armor, fell to the last, but his missiles were the first to strike the Abomination. After Alex's instruction, Tony upgraded his Iron Man armor. While the suit's performance didn't improve much, the weaponry underwent a complete overhaul, significantly increasing its offensive power. The Abomination retained the mercenary's intelligence and character. Years of battlefield experience had instilled in him a perceptive instinct for danger, a quality enhanced by his transformation into the Abomination. The Abomination spotted the missile before it even approached. With a sinister grin, the Abomination suddenly raised one leg and, with a sweeping kick, slammed the toe into the incoming missile. Under the Abomination's immense force, the streaking missile swerved strangely, heading towards General Ross and Betty in the distance. How could this happen? Tony, trailing behind, was utterly stunned by the scene. Watching Tony's missile being deflected, Peter Parker, running in the lead, instinctively shot a stream of silk, attempting to catch it. Peter's control clung to the missile with pinpoint accuracy, but in the blink of an eye, the strong thread was torn apart by the missile, imbued with the power of the Abomination's kick, and it continued to fly towards General Ross and Betty. Peter, realizing something was wrong, tried to fire another strand of spider silk, but he was too slow, and all three of his strands missed. Outside the battlefield, Alex, not expecting such a blunder so early in the battle, grimaced, thinking to himself, "I must focus on teaching Tony when I get back." As he thought, Alex's hands moved with dissatisfaction, and an invisible magnetic field immediately emanated towards the missile's target. Then, at that moment, an unexpected figure descended from the sky, standing right in front of General Ross and Betty. It was none other than the Hulk, who had just been beaten to the ground by the Abomination. Hulk roared to the sky, his muscles flexing and exploding. He thrust his hands outward, unexpectedly catching the oncoming missile. Then, as everyone watched in astonishment, the Hulk's hands crushed the missile, the size of a normal human arm, into a giant metal twist. Tony, perhaps the most alert, saw the Hulk roaring again as if to vent his anger and quickly warned, "Idiot, it'll explode." Alex's actions and Tony's warning were so coincidental that Alex had no time to react. Without a second thought, he activated his teleportation and appeared beside the Hulk, then began to devour. But to Alex's surprise, he felt no surge of energy at all. Turning around for a closer look, Alex was even more puzzled. There was no sign of an explosion anywhere. Just as he was wondering, Alex suddenly heard a dull explosion nearby. He glanced over and saw it coming from the Hulk's body, which was so close. He looked up at the Hulk again. His tightly closed mouth was slightly open, and a powerful burst of energy erupted from it. "You didn't swallow the bomb, did you?" Alex paused for a moment, then immediately understood. He patted Hulk's shoulder, his face filled with disbelief. No one would swallow a missile about to explode, not even Alex would have considered it. Of course, even if he had considered it, Alex would never have done it, even though he had no fear of the missile exploding inside him. It would have been foolish. But Hulk obviously didn't think so, because it was the only way he knew to protect Betty in that situation. Just as Hulk had expected, General Ross and Betty were only slightly startled, unharmed. However, their expressions were quite intriguing. Betty's eyes, needless to say, were filled with deep affection, and she involuntarily leaped forward, lunging at Hulk. As for General Ross, beneath his expression of relief at surviving the disaster, he couldn't hide his astonishment and disbelief. Deep in his eyes, there was even a hint of joy, but he didn't know why. After observing the changes in their expressions, Alex didn't bother to pay attention to the Hulk hugging Betty. He turned his head to look at the battlefield with the other superheroes, disgusted. Chapter 445, Battle of Brooklyn, 5. Tony's botched missile attack shifted the battlefield slightly. Reed temporarily gave up on Abomination, stretching his arms to intercept the missile. But it was clear he had no chance. When Alex turned, Reed was retracting his arm and re-entering Abomination. Susan and Johnny, the siblings, didn't change their strategy and continued to harass Abomination. However, without Reed, the rubbery, wieldy force, Abomination's punches surged in speed and power, making them impossible to stop by Susan and Johnny alone. As for Steve and the other two, Peter Parker tried his best to chase the missile, but they were always just a little short. Even if the silk they continuously fired caught the missile, it would break in an instant, rendering it useless. Tony, wisely aware that he couldn't intercept the missile, activated the arc reactor in his chest and switched to an energy blaster, still targeting Abomination. But Abomination, seemingly determined to destroy the thing, ignored the energy blasts, allowing them to pierce his back, hammering him repeatedly with his fists. The damage from the energy blasts was palpable, breaking several of the spines bulging across his back, but that was all. Meanwhile, the damage from the energy blasts intensified Abomination's ferocity, and the strength in his hands unconsciously increased. The thing directly in front of him was completely overwhelmed, its massive arms beginning to crumble bit by bit, spreading throughout its body. Just as the final straw seemed to be breaking the thing's back, Abomination's fist struck again. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the side, Captain America, holding a star-spangled shield. Steve, holding the shield high in both hands, blocked Abomination's incoming fist, blocking the weakened thing. With a startling resounding roar, Steve ducked slightly, firmly catching Abomination's punch. Captain America, his fist was blocked, and the Abomination was momentarily stunned. Then, looking down, he understood. A snarling grin crossed his terrifying face, a ferocious yet satisfying smirk. Perfect. Let me see the brilliance of the #1 hero. Captain America was undoubtedly the world's first superhero, and the most revered superhero on Earth. With that, the Abomination swung his fist again, hammering Captain America, who had barely recovered from the impact, with even greater force than before. Although he had blocked the Abomination's fatal punch, Steve's condition wasn't as good as he'd expected, even worse. Captain America's shield was a supercapacitor, absorbing most of the Abomination's force, but the intense impact still strained Steve's body, otherwise he wouldn't have been half-kneeling on the ground. But then, the Abomination's attack returned, leaving Steve unable to retaliate. All he could do was curl up again, trying to avoid injury before waiting for a chance to counterattack. The Abomination's punches were incredibly fast, and in an instant, he'd already thrown 3 times, each one blocked by Steve. Steve withstood the test, but the ground beneath him couldn't. A dent had already formed beneath his feet. As the Abomination launched its 4th punch, Alex turned his gaze, and Reed's hands had already been pulled back. Tony launched his next attack, and even Peter Parker had already turned back to attack. Although it was their first fight, Reed and Tony had a remarkable level of chemistry. They exchanged glances and immediately coordinated. Reed didn't try to wrap his arms around the Abomination as he had before. The Abomination's attack was simple, relying solely on strength. Controlling his arms effectively neutralized the Abomination's attacks. This time, however, Reed's hands went for the Abomination's mouth. The Abomination wasn't prepared for this move, and Reed grabbed its mouth, then pried it open with all his might, as if waiting for something. The Abomination paused for a moment, then turned to see Tony fire another energy blast. His expression suddenly changed, and he roared wildly, trying to break free from Reed's control. His dancing fists immediately changed their target, transforming into claws, grabbing Reed's arms from his head, attempting to tear them off. Meanwhile, Peter Parker had already rushed over. Seeing this, he was stunned for a moment, then realized what was happening. Several strands of silk flew out from the launchers on his wrists, wrapping around the Abomination's newly raised arms. The Abomination was struck again. Although the Abomination quickly broke free of the silk, it was too late. Tony's energy blaster had already fired, piercing the Abomination's mouth with pinpoint accuracy. With a loud bang, the Abomination's face was distorted, its eyes, ears, mouth, and nose barely visible. It looked like a newly opened chrysanthemum, blood red. Did it work? Peter Parker looked at the motionless Abomination, looking at Tony with some confusion. Tony shook his head, somewhat bewildered, his eyes instinctively glancing in Alex's direction. With such a severe head injury, he was doomed. Strangely, Tony could clearly sense an unimaginable force awakening from the Abomination's body, brimming with brutality and murderous intent. With the Abomination suffering such a severe blow, Alex had assumed he was doomed. But he hadn't expected such a dramatic turn of events to occur. With a sigh, Alex shook his head and slowly stepped forward. Glancing at Steve and the others, he said in a deep voice, "Stand back for now. The Abomination that awakens soon won't be your match." What the hell is going on? Steve could also sense the changes in the Abomination's body, but he couldn't understand what they were, and his entire body trembled. Alex stared at the Abomination, still transforming, with a mixture of laughter and tears. He shook his head, offering no explanation. Seeing Alex's reaction, Reed frowned slightly, hesitated for a moment, and suggested, "Perhaps we could strike before he completes his transformation." Because of the Abomination's sudden transformation, everyone present paused, hesitating to launch an attack. "It's useless," Alex shook his head and raised his hand to fire an energy shockwave. The bright red energy shockwave shot at the abomination, but there was no reaction at all. Instead, it seemed to nourish the abomination, and the abomination's damaged head actually began to recover. Everyone was dumbfounded, looking at everything in front of them in disbelief. Steve knew Alex very well. Seeing the changes in the abomination, and considering Alex's just secretive behavior, he immediately thought of something and blurted out, "This is energy absorption." Seeing Steve's words, Alex did not hide it anymore and explained, "Yes, my blood has merged into his body. 2 chapters will be released together again. Everyone pay attention. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 446, Battle of Brooklyn, 6. Alex's words stunned everyone present, even General Ross, who couldn't help but exclaim, "How is this possible?" As a powerful figure in the military, General Ross knew Alex intimately. If the abomination truly had Alex's blood, then its treatment would require careful consideration. "I fought the Hulk before, and some of the blood samples your military collected there were mine." Alex glanced at the Hulk, who had calmed down under Betty's soothing touch, then at the still mutating abomination, his expression becoming exceedingly grim. "Originally, I was going to ignore him, but now that he's involved with me, I have no choice but to destroy him completely." Steve and the others remained silent at Alex's words. Reed and Tony exchanged glances, their gazes involuntarily glancing at General Ross. They both understood the significance of a single drop of Alex's blood, especially for a military dedicated to weapons of mass destruction research. As expected, as Alex finished his words, General Ross jumped out, pointing at the abomination and sternly declaring, "No, the abomination must be dealt with by us, whatever." To everyone's surprise, Alex bowed and took a few steps back, saying slowly, "But if you get into trouble, don't look for me." General Ross was startled by this, then immediately realized what was happening. According to Alex's description, the abomination would become even more powerful after its mutation, and no one present except Alex could deal with it. Thinking of this, General Ross turned to look at Reed and the others, who responded with head shakes and a hint of mockery. Steve wanted to help, but remembering Alex's temper, he shook his head and refused. Turning around, General Ross turned his gaze to the Hulk. The Hulk, quieted down, remained completely irrational, paying no attention to General Ross, his supposed enemy. His gaze was fixed on Alex, having recognized Alex as the one who had injured him. It was only because Betty was there to soothe him that the Hulk hadn't charged forward. Seeing no one could defeat him, General Ross gritted his teeth, turned around, and walked into a military command vehicle that had arrived at some point. A moment later, he emerged again, his wrinkled face gleaming with a hint of smugness, as if he were certain of victory. "He just called the Pentagon and is planning to ask for the Sentinel to come in," Tony said, his voice lowered with concern as he sauntered over to Alex. The Pentagon agreed. The memory of the Void was erased from everyone's memory, but the Sentinel's power remained ingrained in the minds of everyone. When the world's memories were erased, Alex had tampered with his own, leaving no changes to his own. Therefore, Alex was the only person on Earth who knew the Sentinel's origins. Upon hearing that the Pentagon was about to deploy sentries, Alex's lips curled slightly as he declared with disdain, "Misfortunes sent by heaven can be survived, but those brought upon oneself cannot." "What did you say?" Tony asked, bewildered, not understanding Alex's words, which had been spoken in Chinese. Alex shook his head without replying, turning to look at the abomination, whose transformation was nearing completion. A faint, yet profound smile crossed his face. The abomination's transformation had finally concluded, its surging aura stabilizing, and its damaged head had healed. The abomination remained the same abomination, seemingly unchanged at first glance. However, a closer look revealed that its scales had become more lustrous, and its protruding bone spurs sharper, like razor-sharp swords. With a roar to the heavens, the abomination's head spun, its stern gaze sweeping across everyone, and with a smirk, he declared, "You, all of you, must die." The abomination responded with another roar, from the Hulk. The abomination's threat didn't elicit a counterattack from Steve and the others, but instead ignited Hulk's rage, reminding him of the beating he'd just received. Shaking off Betty's soothing hands, Hulk leaped to his feet, arms slightly extended, and swooped down on the abomination like a hawk swooping down on its prey. Hearing the sound of wind, the abomination turned back, and upon seeing the Hulk swooping down, a cruel smile played on his face. With a push of his right foot, his massive body soared like a rocket, far faster than the Hulk. Arriving before Hulk could descend, the abomination intercepted him, shoulder-butting Hulk and with a powerful thrust, sending the heavy body flying. Alex narrowed his eyes as he watched the abomination fall from the air, his expression grim. Judging from the abomination's performance, his strength, speed, and reflexes had greatly increased since his transformation. Hulk would need to be even more furious if he wanted to defeat the abomination. Of course, that was assuming the abomination hadn't gained any other abilities. But it was clear that the abomination had gained some ability. Alex suspected it was most likely energy absorption, which was exactly what Alex hated. Just as he was thinking about this, a flash of golden lightning appeared. It was none other than the Sentinel, now in a new outfit. Seeing the Sentinel's new look, Alex's first thought was Superman. Aside from the color of the uniform and the placement of the S logo, the Sentinel and Superman looked almost identical. Of course, the Sentinel wasn't wearing any underwear. What do we do now? Steve leaned over to Alex, looking up at the Sentinel, then at the abomination, who had grown serious at the Sentinel's arrival. His face was filled with worry. Are we really going to let the military take the abomination? In Steve's opinion, the Sentinel was a formidable force on Alex's level, and the abomination was no match for him. If the Sentinel really attacked, the abomination would be the military's prize. It's not that simple. Just wait and see. Alex smiled faintly and shook his head, his expression of disapproval leaving Steve and the others perplexed. Out of trust in Alex, everyone exchanged glances and fell silent, turning to look at the abomination and the Sentinel, anticipating the ensuing battle. Alex still didn't understand the abomination's true strength after its transformation. Hulk and the Sentinel were willing to lead the charge, giving Alex a chance to understand his opponent, and Alex couldn't be more pleased. Even if the Sentinel truly defeated the abomination, Alex had a plan to completely destroy the abomination before the military could take it away, leaving no trace. Stop, there's still time. The Sentinel, having sealed off his nihilistic personality, became more and more like Captain America. Instead of initiating a fight, he offered persuasive advice. Go to hell, the abomination growled, then with a jolt of his body, leaped up again, pouncing on the suspended Sentinel. The Sentinel stepped aside, easily dodging the abomination's lunge. His calm face was filled with indifference. One last warning, so nagging, the abomination's attack missed and fell to the ground. Upon hearing the Sentinel's words, he roared again and leaped towards the Sentinel again. Readers, remember to give Scorpio a recommendation after reading this. It's really not asking for much. Chapter 447, Battle of Brooklyn, 7. This time, the sentry didn't dodge and took the initiative to meet him. In that case, don't blame me. Just as the two were about to collide, a man suddenly jumped out from the side, grabbed the ankle of the high-jumping abomination, and pulled abomination down with a strong pull. Hulk, abomination fell to the ground, rolled to his feet, turned his head to look at the person behind him, roared angrily, and then kicked. Hulk rolled sideways to avoid abomination's big foot, then jumped up, swinging a fist to hide abomination's chest. Abomination's face turned cold, and he slapped his hands under his body, straightened his body, bent down and hugged Hulk's waist, and stood up with Hulk. The transformed abomination's power was even greater, far surpassing the Hulk's current state. Hulk's massive form was thrust backward, leaving two long footprints on the ground. Hulk landed a punch on the abomination's back, covered in bone spurs. Instead of injuring the abomination, the spurs pierced him, causing him to feel a sharp pain. Furious, and at the abomination's dominance, Hulk roared, reaching out and grasping a bone spur. With a sharp snap, he yanked it free, thrusting it into the abomination's shoulder, sending a stream of blood spurting out. The pain intensified the abomination's ferocity, its strength increasing slightly. Hulk's retreat accelerated, and in the blink of an eye, he was pushed against the wall. The solid wall couldn't withstand the abomination's force, and in a moment, a massive crack appeared, allowing the abomination to charge into the room. Hulk struggled, hammering at the abomination's back with his fists, but he was powerless. Sentinel, help the Hulk. Elsewhere, General Ross, seeing the Hulk completely pinned down, looked up at the motionless Sentinel with a panicked expression, shouting frantically. The Sentinel glanced down at General Ross and shook his head in defiance. This is a fight between two of them. I can't interfere. The Sentinel's voice, neither too fast nor too slow, reached everyone present, clearly audible. The superheroes looked at each other in astonishment. Even Steve, the ever-righteous Captain America, was speechless. Is this guy trying to be funny? A snarky voice suddenly chimed in. Deadpool, dressed in a costume resembling Spider-Man's, stepped out of the shadows and glared up at the Sentinel with utter disdain. Chivalry? What era are we still talking about? Such old-fashioned nonsense. Deadpool's initial impact was so intense that everyone was stunned. Hey, men, we look alike. Deadpool completely ignored the weird atmosphere around him, turned his head to look at Spider-Man who looked similar to him, and his mean voice sounded again. Let's find a chance to have a drink together. I believe our hobbies must be very compatible. Alex rubbed his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, Deadpool, shut your mouth. Deadpool is fearless, but for some reason, he is a little afraid of Alex. When he heard what Alex said, he immediately raised his hand to cover his mouth, and a pair of white eyes, on the uniform, stared at Alex. Alex smiled wryly, shook his head, and said, if you want to join in the fun, just stay put and don't do anything. Finally, Alex added, and don't say a word. After scolding Deadpool, who had come to watch the fun alone, Alex looked up at the sentry and calmly explained, my men are just rude. Just ignore them. After explaining to the sentry, Alex ignored him. In a flash, he caught up with the Abomination and the Hulk. He raised his hand and unleashed a fireball, incinerating the blood that had flowed from the Abomination after the Hulk had stabbed him with a bone spur. General Ross, who had been secretly watching Alex, became even more anxious when he saw Alex's actions. He wanted to stop him, but he didn't know how. He was as anxious as an ant on the hot pan, and he kept looking up at the sentry with a pleading look. Unfortunately, the sentry ignored him, still showing his super expert arrogance. Watching the encroaching streets and the people fleeing in panic, Susan felt a pang of reluctance. She glanced at Reed beside her and whispered, are we really just going to stand by and watch? There's nothing we can do about the fight between the Hulk and the Abomination. Reed shook his head helplessly. It wasn't that they didn't want to help, but they simply couldn't. Going in would be like throwing an egg against a rock, completely useless. After a moment's hesitation, Reed added, while we can't help in the fight, we can certainly do something to save lives. As the Fantastic Four began to rescue people, Peter and Tony exchanged a glance and joined in. Steve glanced at General Ross, who looked determined, then smiled wryly, shook his head, and ran off. In the blink of an eye, Ross and his daughter were the only ones left, save for the aloof Sentinel and Deadpool, lurking in a corner. In the distance, as the battle between Hulk and Abomination intensified, the affected area grew larger and larger. All of Brooklyn was ravaged by the two monsters, the casualties steadily climbed, and the economic losses were incalculable. Betty and Ross boarded a new helicopter, chasing Hulk and Abomination from a distance. Looking down at the chaotic streets below, they spoke gravely, Father, let him take action. General Ross, his face as gloomy as water, gazed at the Sentinel outside the helicopter and demanded sharply, Sentinel, isn't it your duty to protect humanity? Are you just going to watch them destroy everything? General Ross couldn't command the Sentinel, but he had another idea, provoking them. They're already angry. If I intervene, it will only make things worse. The Sentinel shook his head expressionlessly, explaining calmly, even worse, the Sentinel knew his own limitations. His only means of stopping Hulk and Abomination were his fists, and he lacked the confidence to subdue both in a short period of time. If a fight really broke out, a two-way conflict would only turn into a three-way melee, causing even greater devastation. General Ross's face suddenly turned ashen. He looked down at the two entangled figures below, his sinister eyes flashing with countless expressions, as if hesitating about something. General, the White House is calling. At this moment, a slightly hesitant voice interrupted General Ross's thoughts. General Ross paused, his face changed, and he reached out to take the phone from the soldier. A moment later, General Ross put down the phone, sighed, and said, he belongs to you, Alex. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. Alex's voice echoed eerily in the cramped helicopter, his calm tone filled with mockery. All of Brooklyn is almost destroyed. Where are you? General Ross was startled and turned to look around, but there was no sign of Alex. Alex had been following behind Hulk and Abomination. But he was always paying attention to General Ross, So he was the first to hear General Ross's compromise. He chuckled and shook his head and replied, "No need to look for me, I'll go solve your problem now." Chapter 448, Battle of Brooklyn, 8. After a long silence from Alex, General Ross's heart began to settle. He turned to look at the sentinel outside the helicopter, a look of worry on his face. Sentinel, is he really capable? The Brooklyn incident had reached the White House, and General Ross had to resolve the Hulk and Abomination issue quickly. Otherwise, not only would his position be reported, but he might even face a court-martial. General Ross couldn't help but worry. The Sentinel's gaze fixed on the tangled figures below, but he couldn't find Alex at all. He hesitated for a moment, shook his head, and said, "I don't know." After a long pause, he added, "If he fails, then no one on Earth can stop them." In the heart of the battlefield, Alex had no idea the Sentinel had such high regard for him. He was scratching his head, hesitant about what to do. A single move could affect the entire situation. If Alex rashly intervened in the fight between Hulk and Abomination, the most likely outcome would be a combined attack from both. While he wasn't worried about an attack from the two, he didn't want to be beaten. After much deliberation, Alex decided to separate them, sparing Brooklyn from the disaster and eliminating the need for the two men to attack. Acting immediately, Alex telekinetically locked onto Abomination, then forcibly teleported him, carrying Abomination away from Brooklyn. Of course, before leaving, Alex sent a message to Sentinel, "Please, keep an eye on the Hulk. I'll be back soon." The Hulk was in a rage. Without Abomination's restraint, his rage would have nowhere to vent, and all of Brooklyn would surely suffer. Therefore, Alex needed to find a rival for the Hulk, and Sentinel was undoubtedly the most suitable. As Alex had anticipated, after losing his target, the Hulk froze for a moment, then roared and began wreaking havoc. In the blink of an eye, he destroyed an entire avenue, leaving gaping holes in the buildings on either side. In mid-air, the Sentinel, also receiving Alex's message, was stunned at first, but then suddenly realized what was happening when he saw the Hulk, the lone figure left on the battlefield. He dashed in front of the Hulk and met his blow with a raised fist. Where did he go? General Ross, noticing the Abomination's disappearance, asked frantically, his expression tense. Although he had promised to hand the Abomination over to Alex, General Ross still harbored a lingering hope, hoping to obtain even a small portion of its remains. Unfortunately, no one could answer General Ross's question, not even the world itself. Because Alex had brought the Abomination to Mars. "Stay here," he punched the Abomination in the chest and threatened, "If you behave well, I'll consider sparing your life." No matter how powerful the Abomination was, it couldn't survive in space. No matter how far it ran, it couldn't escape Mars, and Alex didn't have to worry about not finding it. Abomination stared blankly at Alex as he vanished. He looked down at the piercing wound in his chest, horrified not only by the unfamiliar surroundings but also by Alex's recent punch. To intimidate Abomination, Alex had used all his might in that single punch, channeling not only all the energy in his body but also harnessing his magnetic field control. His fist, coated in a layer of metal, created a magnetic field-like effect, akin to railgun. The resulting effect was astonishing. A single punch pierced Abomination's chest, a feat Alex hadn't anticipated. Even an enraged Hulk attacking Abomination wouldn't have had the same effect, not to mention the fact that Abomination might possess energy absorption abilities. The power of a single punch was truly horrifying. Abomination, the victim, was visibly shaken. His expression shifted, finally giving way to a long sigh. He collapsed to the ground, staring blankly at the vast starry sky, a starry vision unlike Earth's. Abomination, besides grieving on Mars, Alex immediately returned to Earth after abandoning Abomination. Upon returning to Brooklyn, the first thing he saw was the battle between Sentry and Hulk. Their fight was even more ferocious than the one between Hulk and Abomination, and the devastation wrought was even more staggering. The Hulk possessed an immense potential to grow stronger as he grew angrier, which meant he often grew stronger against stronger opponents. Sentry's strength was naturally no match for Abomination, so Hulk's outburst was understandable. However, Sentry, likewise, grew stronger against stronger opponents. The clash between the two only intensified, their battle only intensifying. Even though Alex had been away for less than a minute, another block of Brooklyn had been destroyed. Sentinel is truly a nuisance, Alex sighed, appearing at the edge of the battlefield with a fleeting telepathic attack on Sentry's mental defenses. "Sentinel, stop," Sentry's willingness to seal the void demonstrated his remarkable self-control. Alex's warning brought Sentry back to reality, realizing the disaster he had just caused. His face paled, and he dropped Hulk and flew away, disappearing in an instant. Alex ignored the Sentry's departure, for the Hulk, having lost his target once again, was enraged again. Both Abomination and the Sentry at least possessed rationality, capable of being intimidated and persuaded by Alex. But the Hulk, at least for now, was utterly irrational. Alex's telepathy had no effect on the Hulk, and violence only made him stronger. Simply put, the enraged Hulk was an unstoppable bug. Fortunately, the Hulk still had Betty, who could sober him from his rage, and a sober Hulk possessed a modicum of rationality. So, Alex's strategy was simple. He repeatedly telepathically transmitted Betty's voice deep into the Hulk's mind. Of course, Betty's voice was a simulation, but that didn't diminish its effectiveness. It proved to be the Hulk's Achilles heel. The moment Betty's voice rang out, the Hulk, fixated on destruction, paused, his emerald eyes illuminating for a moment. Although the Hulk quickly regained his composure, Alex's persistent efforts weakened his rage, and the force of his destructive actions diminished. Finally, the Hulk came to a complete stop, his emerald eyes no longer confused. He turned and surveyed his surroundings, as if searching for something. Alex was about to continue his efforts when an unexpected person appeared beside the Hulk, Betty. Alex was so focused on comforting the Hulk that she hadn't noticed Betty's approach. Bruce, Betty cautiously approached the Hulk, her right hand slowly extended, as if to touch him. The Hulk seemed startled, and he instinctively took a step back. His confused eyes, like the moon parting through the clouds, became clear and full of affection. Bruce, Betty, also staring into the Hulk's eyes, immediately noticed the change. A delighted smile spread across her pretty face, and her pace quickened, as she trotted towards the Hulk. Hulk backed away, slowly raising one hand to signal Betty not to come any closer. Betty was stunned for a moment, unconsciously stopped, and looked up at Hulk. Bruce, Hulk, who almost never spoke, uttered a single word, looked Betty deeply in the eye, and then leaped up. After a few jumps, he disappeared into a sea of tall buildings. Chapter 449, Recruiting the Abomination. Seeing the Hulk flee, General Ross immediately panicked. He sprinted towards the helicopter, shoved the pilot aside, and appeared ready to fly after the Hulk himself. Betty, who had been gazing blankly at the direction the Hulk had vanished, snapped to her senses at the sound and rushed forward to stop General Ross. Let him go. He doesn't belong here, or to anyone else. Stop trying to get your attention on the Hulk, or you'll regret it. Alex coughed softly and warned, gesturing casually around with a pointed hand. What a shame, Brooklyn. Remember, my home is right here. General Ross was stunned by the words. After a moment's silence, he slumped dejectedly into the driver's seat, shaking his head and saying nothing. Alex looked at the seemingly resigned General Ross, chuckled, and nodded. He turned to find Steve and the others, teleporting to their side. What? You're not going after the Hulk? Tony's questioning voice came muffled through the mech, effortlessly lifting a fallen beam. No rush, we'll meet sooner or later. Alex shook his head, saying something, and turned to leave. I'll leave this place to you. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. There was no rush for the Hulk. Alex's thoughts were now focused on the Abomination, who was still on Mars. Teleporting back to Mars, Alex was surprised to find that the Abomination was still there, very well behaved, without any of the violent ferocity he had shown during his battle with the Hulk. Why didn't you run away? Alex looked the Abomination up and down, his face full of curiosity. Alex didn't know much about the Abomination, but he could guess that he didn't seem like someone who would be scared. Seeing that Alex had indeed reappeared, Abomination shuddered slightly and quickly stood up. He looked down at Alex and explained seriously, I can't beat you, and I can't escape. I might as well just listen to you. At least there's hope of survival. Oh, you're quite sensible. Alex looked at Abomination with curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, he asked seriously, tell me, what are your plans? Alex didn't completely believe what Abomination said, and asked this deliberately, just to test him. Abomination seemed to be really determined to follow Alex. As soon as he opened his mouth, he expressed his loyalty in various ways. My life will be yours from now on. Just do your bidding. You really want to follow me? Alex tilted his head, looking at Abomination with a smile, his face full of rogueness. Abomination nodded without hesitation. Yes, I'll follow you from now on. Sorry, you're not qualified yet. Alex's expression suddenly darkened, and he sneered. Without hesitation, he struck again, aiming the same punch from before, but now his target shifted from Abomination's chest to Abomination's head. Sensing Alex's cold, murderous intent, Abomination instinctively tried to dodge, but then gave up, remaining motionless as Alex's fist barreled towards his head. In the end, Alex's fist missed Abomination's head, stopping just a few centimeters away. Alex stared at Abomination, whose expression remained unchanged, for a long moment before asking, "Why didn't you dodge? My life is already yours, you can take it any time you want." Abomination, seemingly possessed by a young and dangerous character, spoke in a phrase familiar from Hong Kong films. "Yes, that's some good flattery," Alex nodded, muttering casually. Then, his expression shifted. And he added nonchalantly, "But you're definitely not qualified right now. You need retraining." Without waiting for Abomination to recover, Alex teleported him to Paradise Tang, the asteroid home to the mutants. "Emma, I'll leave this guy to you." Alex approached Emma and handed Abomination to her, silently admonishing, "Remember to educate him. This guy is no pushover." As he spoke, Alex explained Abomination's origins in detail, before adding, "If all else fails, just kill him and prevent future trouble." After understanding the whole story, Emma gave Abomination a deep look and nodded, accepting the situation. Alex didn't stay long on Paradise Island, returning to Earth after a short while. Before he knew it, a month had passed, and the X-Men base in the New York suburbs was essentially complete. The mastermind from the film was also built and put into operation at Alex's suggestion, and Charles's main brain chamber became his most frequented spot. The X-Men's daily routine shifted from combat to recruiting, scouring the world for mutants who hadn't joined any faction and inducting them into the mutant home. Alex, a restless man, reluctantly worked with the X-Men for a few days before finally becoming hands-off. After leaving the base to Charles, he headed to Stark Tower, intending to take over Steve's training of Tony Stark. However, Alex's search was in vain. Tony wasn't there. "Jarvis, where's Tony?" Alex asked, bewildered, at the deserted top floor. "Welcome, Mr. Alex." Jarvis, ever polite, greeted him first, then explained, "Mr. Stark is currently under investigation by the Department of Defense and isn't here." "Department of Defense? What the hell?" Alex pulled a bottle of champagne from the wine cabinet, poured himself a glass, and drank it, enjoying the view over New York City, feeling incredibly happy. Jarvis seemed to pause for a moment before explaining, "The U.S. government wants Mr. Stark to contribute the Iron Man armor's technology, but Mr. Stark isn't willing, so." "Understood." Alex snapped his fingers before Jarvis could finish, a hint of mockery on his face. "They're truly insatiable?" After his rant, Alex shuddered, a sudden thought dawning on him, his expression changing to something odd. "Iron Man 2? That's a piece of cake. I won't get involved." Tony Stark being questioned by the Department of Defense wasn't at the beginning of Iron Man 2. However, the film's villain, Deathstroke, was pathetically weak, and Alex wasn't even remotely interested. With Tony's current strength and equipment, he could easily defeat Deathstroke. Thinking of Iron Man 2, Alex suddenly realized that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had entered a fast lane. Various forces and powerful individuals were constantly appearing on Earth. It was going to be a very lively place. "By the way, Jarvis, are there any good movies coming out recently?" Alex put everything aside, bored to death, and ready to have some fun. Jarvis's thoughts paused again, and it took him a long time to react. "Green Lantern, a comic book movie that was recently released." "Green Lantern? Isn't this from DC?" After Alex became fascinated by superheroes, he collected a lot of superhero movies, and Green Lantern was one of them. "Yes, Green Lantern is indeed a superhero created by DC Comics," Jarvis answered honestly. Alex smiled strangely. "Okay, let's watch this. Green Lantern is purely a spoof. DC superheroes will not appear in this book, and even if they do, it will only be in this form." Chapter 450 Thor's Hammer. Before the movie was even finished, Tony Stark returned, a smug look on his face, followed by Pepper Potts and, surprisingly, Natasha, the Black Widow. Alex was even more incredulous because Natasha was dressed in a professional suit, looking a bit like a professional shrew. "Natasha, what's wrong with you?" Alex glanced back and forth between Tony and Natasha, a look of astonishment on his face. Tony and the others weren't surprised to see Alex, and they each found a seat. Natasha was even more direct, throwing down her folder and plopping down next to Alex. She complained, "What else could it be? It's all because of Tony." "What do you mean?" Alex was confused. He had already changed the plot, so how could Natasha still be Tony's secretary? "The US government has ordered SHIELD to intensify their spying on Tony." Natasha rolled her eyes, pointing at Tony, who was drinking himself. "Nick had no choice but to send me." "When did SHIELD come under the control of the US government?" Alex frowned, his expression serious. Natasha smiled bitterly, shook her head, and explained, "SHIELD is headquartered in New York, and the US provides the bulk of its funding. There's really nothing we can do." After a brief pause, Natasha added, "Besides, with me here, we can also protect against US government agents. Their methods are no less powerful than SHIELD. Alex remained non-committal and changed the subject, asking, "Where is Steve? Why isn't he here?" "Nick sent him back. He said he needs to train some new recruits," Natasha replied casually, leaning back on the sofa. "New recruits?" Natasha's answer piqued Alex's interest. Steve was no ordinary man, and anyone worthy of his training was definitely not just any ordinary agent. Natasha smiled calmly, motioning for Alex to give her a back rub before she spoke. "That tank Pym. He's invented a Pym particle, a subatomic particle named after him." After explaining, Natasha continued, "This particle gives him the ability to change his size and communicate with all kinds of ants." Pym particles. Tony, upon hearing something that interested him, immediately leaned over, his face brimming with hope. Natasha rolled her eyes and shook her head, saying, "Don't even think about it. He won't give it up." Hawkeye, Ant-Man, USHIELD are full of such talented people. Alex lost interest after hearing Natasha's explanation and started to tease her playfully. Natasha chuckled and snapped, "How about you bring all the X-Men with you to SHIELD? SHIELD has countless talented people, but 99% of them are ordinary people. Only a handful of them are truly exceptional in a war. In the several battles that have already taken place, SHIELD's primary role has been mopping up the mess, which has seriously damaged SHIELD's reputation. Forget it, it's better for the X-Men to remain independent." Alex hurriedly shook his head. Then, thinking of someone, he immediately suggested, "Aren't there plenty of superheroes in New York? You could definitely recruit them." Natasha rolled her eyes again, her face resigned. "You think we haven't approached them? They're all so arrogant, they wouldn't even want to join SHIELD. Well, to be honest, SHIELD isn't very appealing to superheroes." Alex thought for a moment and nodded. "You did it on purpose." Natasha leaped up at him, twisting around and grabbing Alex's neck with both hands, her pretty face brimming with murderous intent. Alex shrugged and said nonchalantly, "That's the truth. Never mind, you win." Natasha dejectedly let go of his hand and sank back onto the sofa, her expression gloomy. Alex felt a slight embarrassment at this, and with a dry laugh, he asked again, "By the way, has anything unusual happened lately?" "What? Bored?" Natasha raised her eyes slightly, squinting at Alex with a playful expression. Without waiting for Alex to speak, Natasha spoke up, "Speaking of which, something did happen recently. A few days ago, a hammer fell from the sky and landed in New Mexico." As she spoke, Natasha glanced at Alex, noticing that he was lost in thought. She dismissed the question and continued, "It's strange. The hammer doesn't look big, but no one can pick it up. Even someone trying to pull it with a car can't. So amazing? I'd love to see it." Tony emerged, donning his Iron Man armor, a look of disdain beneath his lifted visor. "You'll have your chance. Coulson's already set off to investigate." Natasha ignored the showy Tony and turned to Alex. Alex had been silent since he opened his mouth, and Natasha sensed something was amiss. Alex knew Thor's hammer would appear on Earth, but he hadn't expected it to appear so soon. How could the story of Thor have already begun before Iron Man 2? After much reflection, Alex could only attribute it to the butterfly effect caused by his own appearance. But now that Thor's hammer had appeared, Alex naturally couldn't just sit back and watch. Thinking of this, Alex immediately came back to his senses, turned to look at Natasha and asked solemnly, "Are there any photos of that place? I want to go and have a look." Natasha knew Alex's temper well, and when she heard Alex say that, she immediately understood, and looked at Alex curiously. "Why, what do you know, Thor? That hammer is Thor's hammer." Alex was not going to hide it, and after thinking about it, he began to explain. Thor is not the Thor in Norse mythology, but a real god who exists and lives in a realm called Asgard. Are you sure you are not kidding me, Alex? Natasha slowly sat up straight and looked at Alex with a serious expression. Alex shook his head and said with a smile, in fact, I have visited Asgard and even fought with this god of thunder. At this point, Alex seemed to recall the days in Asgard. He pondered for a moment before continuing, to be honest, that muscle guy is quite strong. Are you serious, Alex? Tony looked at Alex in amazement, with doubt in his eyes. Do gods really exist in this world? God is just a title. In fact, they are just some creatures with special abilities. Alex smiled indifferently and said casually, in Asgard, not everyone is powerful. Thor is considered the strongest warrior there, except for Odin. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.